the room, proceeding through the door immediately on your left, down the stairs and out to the South Main Street, proceeding to the parking lot. Once in the parking lot, stay clear of the building and wait the arrival for the fire department. Okay. We're gonna call to order the planning and zoning meeting for July 26. Could we get a first call?
Yes, Mr. Kurtz, absent. Mr. Strollo.
Here.
Mr. Natale, me, I'm here. Mr. Tedisco. Here. Mr. Dawson. Mr. Carderas. Mr. Linder. Mr. Bowman. Here. Mr. Mercado.
Here.
Mr. Anderson. Mr. Salmont. Here. Ms. Downs.
She's not here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our first order of business is special application, Town of Cheshire, George Nowotny for 55 Railroad Ave, parking lot, Farmington Canal Heritage Trail. Call, please.
The special permit application of George Nowotny, Town of Cheshire, care of Kevin Grindle, Barton, and Lojudici, LLC, 41 Sequin Drive, Glastonbury, Connecticut, 06033 for construction of a parking lot with a landscaped rain garden to provide additional overflow parking for the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail, property located at 55 Railroad Avenue, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, as generally shown on Assessor's Map number 49, lot number 6, in an I-1 zone.
Can I get your name and address for the record, please?
For the record, I'm Kevin Grindle with Barton and LaJudas, Senior Project Manager with the firm, located at 41 Sequin Drive in Glastonbury, Connecticut. We serve as the town's on-call engineer, serving the Public Works Department and Engineering Department. So thank you all for the time this evening. As the application indicated and the plan submission that was provided to you depicts, the parking lot we are here before you this evening to discuss, located at 55 Railroad Ave. It is designed to be an overflow parking lot for the existing Farmington Canal Heritage Trail parking lot that's currently constructed on Railroad Ave. The impetus for this dates back 2 years when the town purchased the property for said use that we're here before you this evening with. It's approximately 0.29 acres, so about a third of an acre of property. 100 by 130 plus or minus. And what we're looking to do is construct a paved parking lot with 18 parking spaces and handle or mitigate any stormwater increase by the adjacent rain garden as shown on the plan. That rain garden will be planted with species that will mimic the existing parking area currently constructed at the trailhead to give us some continuity between the parking areas. The intent of this overflow parking lot will be, again, 18 spaces used during fair weather conditions. The intent is that, as shown on the plan, it will not be plowed in the wintertime, will be gated during winter season, really a three-season overflow lot. To protect the adjacent properties, acknowledging that this is an industrial zone, but to provide them with some additional buffer areas. You will see on the plan that there is a screen, a 6-foot-high PVC fence screening the adjacent residential dwelling, and a barrier of a 3-rail fence, again, to mimic the existing trailhead configuration. That 3-rail fence would be on the other 2 sides of the parking lot. To contain the vehicles within the paved areas, you'll also see a timber guide rail that serves as containment, making sure that those vehicles stay within the paved areas and not within the adjacent grass areas, and a barrier to keep them from entering a rain garden if there had been an accident, if you will. So with that being said, I'm hopeful to receive any comments you have. Obviously, this is a public hearing, so here to respond to any questions and comments. But really the intent is that it's a town property purchased for this use. What the Public Works Department is hoping to do is put this out to bid in the very short order so that we can construct this during this fall, this construction season, so that either late this season or early in the spring, we can be taking advantage of this overflow parking area for that trailhead. So With that being said, that concludes my presentation. But obviously, as public hearing, I'm happy to take any questions or comments you do have at this time. Thank you.
Any questions from anyone? Commissioner? Go ahead.
One question. I know that you're going to put the handicap spots across the street. So, handicap folks don't have to cross. And obviously it's not a requirement, but I've heard that getting handicap parking right now down there is really tough with the limited spots. You have any thoughts about, instead of putting one more spot over there, maybe two at the existing lot?
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. That was a point, obviously, having worked with the town planner as far as those comments and that response. Forgive me, I didn't bring that up as part of my initial presentation. The intent here is that the existing parking lot has 12 spaces with one handicap space. What we're doing is entering in or bringing in another 18, therefore a total of 30. That does require 2 spaces. And what we are proposing to do is site those 2 spaces at the nearest proximity to the trailhead, rather than across the street in this overflow parking area, thereby satisfying the goals and intent to provide them, nearest accessible parking areas to the trailhead. To your point, that existing parking lot is generally flat in nature. I would be comfortable. It would be a comfortable response that if so chose, we could provide a third handicap space within that existing lot. If that was your preference.
Gotcha. And again, not a requirement, just a suggestion, because of feedback that I've gotten about people having problems finding handicap parking down there.
Mr. Bowman?
Did you ever consider not paving it and just leaving it natural, thereby not creating an impervious surface?
Yes, we did consider it. Speaking from a public works and engineering perspective, the ongoing maintenance of a gravel surface or stone surface would really was not a preference for that department. The intent is to put the money into the initial construction phase and then mitigate any of the stormwater increases by a larger rain garden and infiltration basin, thereby offsetting so there's no increase to offsite runoff, and really reducing or limiting the exposure the town would have for future maintenance activities. Again, thinking of, early season activities where staff would be required to go in, correct ruts, fix erosion onto the grass areas, and then acknowledging that many people are out using the trails on days in March and April, that freeze-thaw cycle that would really promote ruts in those areas. It's something that Public Works would like to avoid, and thereby paving was the preference.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
he's correct. I mean, we do allow temporary parking to not be paved, but this is going to be a permanent paving, and the regulations require 10 or more spaces be paved when it's permanent parking. So I think the regulations would really overcome
Thank you.
that. So
Anyone else? I just have one question. Now, is there still one house left on Railroad Avenue? Or is there 2 houses left after? Because this is going to be a house knocked down, right?
This
Wait.
house has been demolished.
Okay.
I will say the nearest property to this house.
To the left, is there 2 houses or 1 house? I can't remember.
Forgive me, I do not recall. I've been
Okay.
focusing on the house
I'm
immediately
looking
to
at
the
the
left.
overview, but I can't remember if there's 2 houses there or 1. Only 1 left, I
I
think.
will say the one that I've been focusing on, I also
Yeah,
have
one
an
left.
aerial photograph with me that only shows that one, or I could have quickly responded. But
Okay.
unfortunately, I am unclear as to whether there's 1 or 2 there.
Okay, all right. Anyone from the public wishing to ask any questions about this application? Anyone from the public? Okay, if there's no other questions from the commission members, nothing? Okay. We're going to close public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to close the public hearing now, and we're going to recess the public hearing right now, and we're going to open the regular meeting and do our regular business, and they're going to reconvene the public hearing after we're done with the meeting. So that's how we're going to roll. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting. And we have a quorum. The pledge and acceptance of minutes. You want to read those out?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the two meetings on the 12th of July and additionally for the special meeting held on the 14th of July.
Okay, so move Mr. Dawson. Any second by Mr. Brucato? Any motion second by Mr. Dawson? Yeah, you got me. Mr. Tesco?
I'll vote on the minutes on the 12th. That was our regular meeting.
Okay.
I didn't attend the meeting on the 14th, so we'll stay on.
The 14th, yeah,
Yeah, I'll amend my motion. Let's go with the two meetings that were held on the 12th first. So
Okay. Okay, so the motion going to be for the two meetings on the 12th. Okay. And Mr. Ross is going to second that. Okay, any questions about that or? Okay, all those fair, somebody say aye?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous.
I'd like to make a motion to approve minutes from the meeting held on the July 14th.
Who's going to second that meeting?
Second.
Oh, okay, Mr. Bowman's going to second it. Any discussion on that meeting? Yeah, that was hard to watch. Okay, all those favors in the minutes, somebody say aye?
Aye.
Okay. All right, we're gonna go on to, oh, all right. You got that? Okay. We got communications.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, first one is a correction on a 90-day extension which we had granted for Orchard View subdivision. The dates were screwed up on that one, but I have a motion on this.
Mhm.
The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission hereby grant a 90-day extension to file the final subdivision documents on the Cheshire Land Records for the Orchard View subdivision by October 5th, 2021.
It's supposed to be October 5th, right? Does it? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Second by Mr. Dawson. Any discussion? No? Okay. All those fair say aye? Aye.
Aye.
No, okay.
next item is a request for a 90-day extension. This is for Stonebridge Crossing. This will be the second 90-day extension for this one. This is the Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission hereby grant a 90-day extension for filing of the subdivision Mylar for the approved Stonebridge Crossing as authorized under Section 8-25 of the Connecticut General Statutes.
Second by Mr. Dawson. Discussion? Nothing? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right on. Next.
This is for McKinley Estates. This would be the first one.
Mr.
Cheshire-
Chairman, I will recuse myself for this.
Okay. So only 8 will be voting.
The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission hereby grant a 90-day extension to file the approved subdivision Mylar for McKinley Estates on the land records.
Second, Mr. Kaderis. Discussion? No? All in favor, say aye. Okay. 801. Okay, number 4.
Is subdivision Brewer Estate. This is that 4-lot subdivision on Jarvis
Mr.
Street,
Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this.
Okey-doke.
which we approved recently. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission hereby grant a 90-day extension to file the approved subdivision map for Brewerton Estates on the land records.
Second, Mr. Kaderis. Discussion? No? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Okay. Okay, number 1, Town of Cheshire.
Special permit application, Mr. Chairman. Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find the proposal to construct an 18-space accessory parking lot at 55 Railroad Avenue shown on plans entitled Proposed Parking Area Prepared for Town of Cheshire, Parking Site Plan 55 Railroad Avenue, Cheshire, Connecticut, dated May 3rd, 2021, is consistent with Section 41 special permits of the Cheshire zoning regulations and hereby approve this plan.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to note that I am here for this.
Yes. Okay. So Mr. Dawson's going to second that one since everybody said it one time. And discussion on it at all? No?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Okay, we know that,
Not much to discuss there. It's an asset to the town.
and we know about the handicap spots and well, it's going to be a 3 season type of place. So, okay. Anything else? No? All right, all those in favor, see by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, me 9-all. Okay, now we're gonna ask for a motion to adjourn.
No, you want to do, no, E.G.
Oh, no.
Home.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself.
Where the hell is that though? I'm not-
Unfinished business, regular meeting.
I didn't have it. I don't have it on my.
I have it. This is the published agenda.
Okay, so you have the call though on yours?
No, there's no call on these. You closed the hearing on this. This is not on your public hearing agenda. This is on your regular meeting agenda.
Okay. So it'll be unfinished business.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Well, it's 2, 3, and 4 on here, so.
Well, you have it?
2, 3, and 4 under unfinished business on your regular meeting agenda. It's right here. I'm telling you what I'm looking at, so,
No, it was updated after we received our packet.
yeah,
She said this.
yeah.
Okay, all right, so 1, 2, 3, and 4 is gonna be for the north end.
No, 2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4, 2, 3, and
Yeah.
4.
Okay. Earth removal, filling, and regrading permit, E.G. Home LLC for waivers under section 25.3.5 subsection 3, 9, and 11 of the Cheshire zoning regulations. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that the proposed waivers as shown on plans entitled Multifamily Residential Development Lot 7, Stonebridge Crossing, I-691 and Dickerman Road, Cheshire, Connecticut, revised through July 23rd, 2021, are consistent with good engineering practice and will not jeopardize public health, safety, or welfare, and hereby approve these waivers.
Second by Ms. Kaderis. Discussion. Everybody had this, but it got pushed, so we all should have it. Any discussion on it? No? All those in favor, see by saying aye? Aye. Okay. So 9-all. Number 3.
Now I'm going to read conditions of approval into
Oh, Matt's recused on it. Yeah. So 8-all on this.
the next 2 motions include conditions of approval. I'm telling you, we received revised plans on the 23rd that do satisfy these conditions. So,
Okay.
but I'm going to read them in anyway.
Yep.
Special permit application, E.G. Home LLC, Dickerman Road and I-691 to establish a special development project in the Interchange Special Development District. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that the proposed multifamily residential project is shown on plans entitled Multifamily Residential Development Lot 7, Stonebridge Crossing, I-691 and Dickerman Road, Cheshire, Connecticut, revised through July 23rd, 2021, are consistent with Area C on the concept plan approved by the Commission on February 8th, 2021, and then with the requirements set forth within the Interchange Special Development District regulations, and hereby approve this application conditioned upon the following. 1, location and number of fire hydrants to be approved by the Cheshire Fire Department. 2, all curbing shall be mountable. 3, emergency access gate to be approved by the Cheshire Fire Department. And 4, provision of pedestrian path to provide linkage through the site.
But Mr. Ricardo, second one. Any discussion on it?
Just want to say, I want to thank the applicant, especially for number 4 with that pedestrian pathway. Brought that up. I thought it was a good idea, and I'm glad that they incorporated that. And I'm looking forward to seeing that north end start to get developed.
Anything else? Okay, all those in favor, see by saying aye. Okay,
Application for approval of an interchange special development project, E.G. Home LLC, Dickerman Road and I-691, to establish a special development project in the interchange special development district. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that the proposed multifamily residential project shown on plans entitled Multifamily Residential Development Lot 7, Stonebridge Crossing, I-691 and Dickerman Road, Cheshire, Connecticut, revised through July 23rd, 2021, are consistent with Area C on the concept plan approved by the Commission on February 8th, 2021, and the requirements set forth within the Interchange Special Development District regulations, and hereby approve this application conditioned upon the following. Location and number of fire hydrants to be approved by the Cheshire Fire Department. 2, all curbing will be mountable. 3, emergency access gate to be approved by the Cheshire Fire Department. And 4, provision of pedestrian path to provide linkage through the site.
second by Mr. Ricardo. I'm sorry, Woody. You got it first. All right. Any discussion on that? Discussion? No? All those in favor, seem saying aye? Aye. Okay. 8-0. All right,
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
that's it. So now we will reconvene the public hearing. No?
Are we going back to the regular meeting again?
Oh, no, we were not. So we're gonna have to adjourn the regular meeting. I'm sorry, got ahead of myself. Okay. Se- Second by Mr. McConnell. I'm sorry. Okay. Motion adjourned. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. All right, that's over. We don't have to worry about that. Okay, let's go back to this public hearing. Okay, we're gonna reconvene the public hearing. Go back to number, number two. No, I got the wrong number 2 here. Hold on. I just misplaced my thing. Yeah, let me see that. Okay, we're gonna go back to number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so, zone map change petition. You want to read them all?
The continuation of the public hearing for the zone map change petition of Lovely Development, Inc., care of Anthony J. Fazone Esquire, Fazone, Ryan, and Mercuti, LLC, 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, from R40 to age-restricted overlay zone, property located at 648 Wallingford Road, as generally shown on Assessor's Map number 66, lots numbers 13 and 14 in R40 zone. Legal description available for review in the in the planning office, 84 South Main Street, Cheshire, Connecticut, and on the town website under virtual documents. The continuation of the public hearing for the application for preliminary development plan of Lovely Development, Inc., care of Anthony J. Fazone Esquire, Fazone, Ryan, and Mercuti, LLC, 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, for an age-restricted planned residential development property located at 648 Wallingford Road, is generally shown on Assessor's Map number 66, lots numbers 13 and 14 in an R40 zone. The continuation of the public hearing for the earth removal, filling, and regrading permit of Lovely Development, Inc., care of Anthony J. Fazone Esquire, Fazone, Ryan, and Mercuti, LLC, 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, waiver request per 25.3.2 subsection 9 under section 25.5 for an age-restricted planned residential development property located at 648 Wallingford Road, as generally shown on Assessor's Map number 66, lots numbers 13 and 14 in an R40 zone. The continuation of the public hearing for the special permit application of Lovely Development, Inc., care of Anthony J. Fazone Esquire, Fazone, Ryan, and Mercuti, LLC, 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, for an age-restricted planned residential development pursuant to Section 43.4 of the zoning regulations, property located at 648 Wallingford Road is generally shown on Assessor's Map number 66, lots number 13 and 14 in an R40 zone. And lastly, the continuation of the public hearing for final development site plan application of Lovely Development, Inc., care of Anthony J. Fazone Esquire, Fazone, Ryan, and Mercuti, LLC, 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, for an age-restricted planned residential development pursuant to Section 43.4 of the zoning regulations. Property located at 648 Wallingford Road is generally shown on Assessor's Map number 66, lots number 13 and 14 in R40 zone.
Okay, Mr. Fazone, I know that I allowed everybody to ask questions at the last meeting, and hopefully you have a lot of answers. So I know there was like 20 questions. And
For the record, my name is Anthony Fazone. I'm an attorney here in Cheshire with the law firm of Fazone, Ryan, and Mercuti, with offices at 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut. As stated by the call, this is a continuation of several public hearings dealing with an application to build an age-restricted planned residential development at 648 Wallingford Road. First off, I would like to address some of the questions raised by a memorandum of law that was submitted as an exhibit at the last hearing, and also some of the correspondence that was submitted. The first issue raised was a question that the application, approval of this application would amount to spot zoning. We submit and disagree with that. As the writer, Attorney Wachowski, points out in his memorandum, there are two factors before you can find spot zoning. The first factor is that it has to be a small parcel of land. The second one is that it has to be out of harmony with the comprehensive plan. This parcel of land is 25 acres. It does not fit in any definition of a small isolated parcel. It is, we also submit that it is definitely in harmony with the comprehensive plan, the plan of conservation and development. The zone change itself is specifically provided for in the zoning regulations under 43.4. And I've alluded to this previously in the in my presentation. The beginning paragraph of section 43.4 describes exactly how the regulation was devised to meet the goals in the plan of conservation. Excuse me, at that time it was entitled the Plan of Development and Conservation, and that was the 2002 version. And the 2016 plan has similar goals. Throughout the Plan of Conservation and Development, the current one as well as the prior one, the goals speak of diversity in housing, different types of housing units, and we feel that the record substantiates that this application and or the regulation, and correspondingly this application meets the goals of 43.4 in the Plan of Conservation and Development. The other, we had another reference to the Fair Housing Act in the memorandum, saying that the regulation or the application pursuant to the regulation was not correct, and that family status, i.e. children, could not be a subject of the regulation. We presented an exhibit, should be part of your file, that talks about the Housing for Older Persons Act. We submit that the regulation complies with that act, and that in turn, the proposal complies with the regulations. Again, there is an exhibit that you should have that speaks to the housing of persons, of older persons. There were numerous questions and comments about traffic. We are relying on the testimony of the traffic engineer, the professional engineer, reports that he's submitted. Mr. Hesketh is here available tonight to answer any questions, but we think that basically he has answered in his report, answers all of the questions regarding traffic, including projections of what this development, if approved, would mean to Wallingford Road and Talmadge Road. Would remind the commission that in the Plan of Conservation and Development, Wallingford Road is defined as a collector street, as that is shown in the Plan of Conservation Development. The another group of questions and comments from correspondence has to do with the wetlands on the site. I'm repeating myself, but we have received wetlands approval. The Wetlands Commission reviewed the first set of plans. We then, because of some of the comments that during the first public hearing, the plans were revised to including larger units and a smaller number of units from 40 to 34. That plan was brought back to the Wetlands Commission. They determined that there was no change to the wetlands activities, and that a further application or an application to modify that regulation or that approval was not necessary. This town is very lucky. It has a very competent Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Commission. In their report to the town, and copy of the letter sent to me as the attorney for the applicant, you'll see there's a summary of the plans that the commission went through. Some of the commission members, a couple of them visited the site. The report tells you that they reviewed a wetlands impact study by Matt Sanford of SLR Consulting, formerly Malone and McBroom. And as required by the state statute, they have sent the report to the Planning and Zoning Commission. At this point, we do not believe that the subject of the wetlands is properly the jurisdiction of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Some of this, obviously.
Mr. Bowman has a question.
Could you tell us who chaired the meeting of the Inland Wetlands Commission?
Yes, Dr. Charles Dimmick.
And he's a doctor of?
He's got a PhD in geology and wetland studies. He's a soil scientist also.
Thank you.
As I said, a lot of the questions, comments, one extensive one by correspondence did talk about the wetlands issues. What I've done is I've prepared an exhibit, which I will pass out, and which goes through a portion of section 43.4.4, which is a listing of the matters that the commission must take into consideration if it is going to approve this application. I would like to pass that out at this point in time.
But Mr. Fazone, I think that like at the last meeting, I know that a lot of people asked certain questions. I mean, there were questions about how long the projected build out of the project was. There were questions of, water flow. There were questions of, different property owners were asking about water and stuff like that. And I know that through this application, I realized that, we're having the inland wetlands do their job. But I think that a lot of the people that are in the audience weren't there for those meetings and don't understand the nuts and bolts of that. So, I mean, I'm hoping that the engineer you have here could kind of explain in the project of what's going on with the water, what happens to water in the project, and how it's going to affect the properties around. And that I think that that's more or less what I really feel that of the 20 people that asked questions, 70% were concerned about that. So I think that it's not, do I feel that I'm an expert on? No, but I think that if your engineer could kind of give a little bit, you know, as far as, you know, I know that there's a detention basin in the project, which really hasn't been talked about in this meeting. And I think that maybe if they could understand that a little bit, they can understand about zero water runoff. There's a lot of little things that I think might help the public understand about the project a little bit better, that, you know, that their concerns. And then I know the other question was about build out. How long, once it starts, is the project would take? I know that was a big question. And that I think those are basically the questions that I'm seeing here that I wrote down.
Well, just to take care of the easy one, Mr. Lovely testified or stated that it would be a 2-year build out.
Okay, 2
That's on-
years.
That's on the record. And we certainly, part of our presentation tonight
Mhm.
definitely included Mr. Quirk, Andrew Quirk, the professional engineer.
Okay,
So I'll skip out of order in what I wanted to complete and let Andrew go over the stormwater and a couple
yeah,
of
because like
other-
I said, I know that at the last meeting,
Yeah,
people are just coming up and ask questions,
we
and
wa-
then the
we weren't
questions.
intending to skip that.
Yeah, I know.
And we can get into that at this point in time.
Please,
And I'll save this other stuff for my summation.
thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Commission members. My name is Andrew Quirk, professional engineer and principal with Kratzer Jones and Associates. If it's okay, I have a number of handouts that I'll use for the presentation that might help.
I'll, thank you. You have one extra?
Are there enough?
Just hold on to it or give it to Mrs. Milton. You got one? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I
Okay.
went through in this memo.
Do you have a outlay that the public could see or no?
I have a board when we get to that part.
Okay.
That show, there's some of the attachments I have on the boards.
Okay, if you could just, so the public could see that also. please.
Absolutely, yeah. So I did take a lot of time going through the minutes from the public hearing, the comments from the commission, the completion of the final design to address those issues. And what I tried to do here with this memo is go through those items that were part of the record. This is not, I want to make this sound like this is new information. This is not new information, but there was so much information submitted in terms of plans, stormwater report, a lot of those
Yep.
details that you discussed, that we just didn't, really have a chance to present. They're part of the record, but really go through some of those details that I think the public and the commission want to know about. And so I've pulled some of those items from that record in a more simplified format here, and I'll go through in some detail the items. But these are items that were part of the stormwater management report that was submitted, reviewed by the town engineering staff, as well as
Okay.
the plans and the soil testing data. As I reviewed the comments, at least in my opinion, I grouped them into 4 areas.
Mhm.
The first being the engineering and stormwater design standards. There were just some questions about how do we even do this, and what's the review process, and where do these numbers come from? The second is the stormwater runoff concerns in terms of the modeling, effects
Yep.
on properties and the like, landscaping, and then also earthwork. So I'll just group my presentation in that format.
Okay.
First, in terms of the engineering, stormwater, and design standards, I guess just as background, I am a professional engineer licensed by the state of Connecticut. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil engineering, and have been designing stormwater systems for over 25 years. And also, the public should know that I've worked very closely with the town engineering staff. There's been 2 reviews, both on the previous layout and this one, and we've addressed all the concerns that were raised. It is a rigorous process, the review
Yep.
process that the town has and the standards that they have. And I've included that letter from July 22nd from the town engineering staff indicating that they had no additional comments. They did reiterate their recommendations if there were to be an approval for conditions of approval, and we agree with those, having those recommendations. Those include town staff being involved with observing the construction of the stormwater basin and the groundwater recharge trenches for the home roof water systems. And also, there's a particular note that just needs to be updated, and that would all be incorporated in the final plans, and we agree to
Mhm.
those statements.
Chairman, if I may, just a point of clarification. The town engineering staff includes review by an outside consultant. In fact, the consultant that was here earlier tonight to represent the town on its project.
Yes.
That's the firm that they're using on this particular project. So it's Barton Lojudas, who are an extension of the town engineering staff, but it has been reviewed by them as our outside consultant. So
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So that was the first part in terms of the review. In terms of how we come about these numbers, I don't want to bore you with too many details, but hopefully give you enough information. There's a lot of studies that are done to generate the models that are used for the development for a project like this. The models that we use and the design is to address stormwater runoff rates and water quality. And the project before you, as designed, meets the Cheshire standard for 0 increase in runoff in the peak rate of discharge rates. We use 2 watershed areas that I'll get into. It meets it for both watersheds for the site. Also, it meets the water quality standards, thereby removing at least 80% of the total suspended solids, the sands, et cetera, that are accumulated in the roadway system through that treatment train system that's proposed. So this meets all of the DEP town regulations for runoff rates and water quality treatment. The model that we use is called the DeKalb rational method. It's a method that uses the peak runoff rates as well as the volume, so it looks at both components as part of the model. That's modeled in a computer software program, HydroFlow Hydrographs, and incorporates the TR55 method, which is a national method for the size of the watershed and the time of concentration. What I've included, just for your information, because I know that we've been having quite a rainy period, so you may find this of interest, but also to know that these numbers are real as we're approaching 9 inches of rain, and the record is 11 inches for the month. It comes up a lot of times, how come we keep having so many 100-year storms? So what I did is try to help understand what those storm events mean. So on the 4th page is the data that we use for the model. So the national data now from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They now take the data and they pinpoint it, which is great. So we can put in data specifically for Cheshire. They take the weather data from New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford, and they can geographically locate it to Cheshire. So boxed in that sheet, this is the on that fourth sheet, shows the 24-hour duration, and then the various storm events. They've in this statistical analysis have come up with the 1-year storm, which is 2.81 inches, all the way to the 1,000-year storm, trying to really project out. So, and that's specific to Cheshire. They're able to geographically locate that. So then what I did is on the next page, where it's titled 2019, or 1920 to 2020, NWS, National Weather Service data for Hartford. Hartford, the reason we use Hartford is it has over 100 years of data. New Haven doesn't. I know Cheshire's located probably a little closer to New Haven, but bearing that in mind, if you take the 100 years of data, which is what I did, and you sort it by the largest 24 or calendar day event, so there's a slight difference between calendar day and 24-hour day. The biggest rainfall event was 7.7 inches, which is at the top, the 1955 flood. And the data we use for Cheshire is 8.46, so conservatively larger. And then the second highest storm would be your 50-year storm event, because, simplifying the statistics, it occurred twice within 100 years. Was 6.1, that was the 1938 hurricane. We're using 7.49. And then you go to the 10th storm, 4.41, we're using 5.39, again, conservatively higher. Going down to the 20th storm would be your 5-year storm event. 20th highest rainfall would be your 5-year storm event, 3.34, and the model uses 4.41. So you could go on through the list, and there are some differences in geographical location, calendar day, 24-hour, but the point being, the model takes that into account. The data that we have now is great, where it's specific to the town. And, these are events that when you pair them up with National Weather Service data, the modeling data we're using is conservatively accurate. Now for the for the system that we're using here, it's a much smaller watershed. The time of concentration for the water to collect from that watershed and discharge from the site is not 24 hours. It's just a much shorter time period. One of them was 20 minutes and the other watershed is 30 minutes. So that's where you get into some of those discrepancies of, you may have a 100-year storm event for the Connecticut River. That may not be the 100-year storm event for this watershed. So there's a lot of background in terms of the data, but we have a good system and a good modeling system to represent this and design the systems appropriately. The stormwater runoff concerns, this is shown in the last 3 sheets of your packet, and I have a board for this. So I'm displaying on the board here what is the second to last page of your packet. The title block says pre-development watershed map. I'll just show you the highlighted area. Highlight all the blue area and the orange area. So as part of the design, we first look at the existing conditions, the pre-development conditions. This model describes, uses 2 watersheds to describe the runoff. So EX1, existing conditions 1, is the area that drains from Wallingford towards Wallingford Road. There's an existing culvert in the southwest corner, just off the southwest corner of the property. So we look at all the area that contributes to that culvert. What is the total area that flows to that culvert? So that has approximately 6 acres that drains to that existing culvert, and is collected from that area. And that's represented by EX1. To the right or northeast of the property is a much larger watershed outlined in orange on here, labeled EX2 on the plan you have in front of you. that is the 10 and a half acres that drains northerly and northwesterly towards the wetland system. So there's a breaking point near the existing house where you have runoff that's going directly towards the wetlands versus southwesterly towards the culvert. Those watersheds cover the entire area for the development. So that's the area that would see a change during the development. And so that those are the areas that are used for the modeling to ensure that there is no increase in runoff in either direction caused by the development after it's completed. On the following page, the following page labeled post-development watershed map, very similar map that we're looking at those 2 points of collection and looking at the contributing areas to each. So towards the southwest, marked in blue on the sheet here, labeled PR-1 on the plan before you, is that proposed watershed area that contributes to the culvert. So it's a much smaller area. We do a management of the watersheds to ensure that there's no increase to that culvert. And then there's a table, the third to the last sheet, and watershed 1 shows a 70% to 69% decrease in peak discharge rates. So those flash rates from the site, a reduction to that culvert through this management of the watersheds. And that's for the 2-year storm through the 100-year storm. Watershed 2, which is highlighted in orange on the plan here and is labeled as PR2A and PR2B on the plans you have, is the area that gets managed through the site. It's collected by a system of swales, catch basins, and directed to a stormwater basin. And through that stormwater basin, there's peak attenuation as well as water quality treatment. This stormwater basin is detailed on sheet D3. There's a number of features on it that we've worked closely with as part of the wetland approval and with town staff to have a high quality stormwater basin. It has first a treatment of a sediment forebay, which will collect sediment coming from the pipe system and have it in an area that it can be collected and removed from site. Then there's a large flat area for the peak attenuation. There's a micro pool to provide water quality treatment habitat, and then an outlet riprap filter berm to further treat it before any discharge. There's a soil remediation of biofilter soil that'll promote the biological treatment of the water as it passes through as well. And there's an entire planting schedule that I won't go through, but is on sheet D3, was a big part of the wetlands approval to ensure that it is a natural habitat that functions to clean and treat and provide attenuation to the stormwater runoffs from the site.
You know, like I said, I'm not an expert on this. So understanding is that the backside development, all that water is going to go towards the detention basin.
Correct.
And then as it goes in, you know, fill the basin, whatever, and then it'll sheath off into the if it overflows, it will go into the rest of the property. That's the.
It'll follow the natural pattern through the
Yes.
wetlands. So under the WS1, the pre-development, the natural pattern is that the runoff goes through the wetlands, goes through that wetland system, and then continues northwesterly and eventually through the culvert and Talmadge Road. The other thing with this type of development, with the amount of open space, is that that entire area up to Talmadge Road remains in its natural state.
Mhm.
So the way that it functions, the way the water passes is unchanged. In the subdivision that we presented, there's development in there, so there would be a change immediately adjacent to Talmadge Road. This doesn't have that change.
And
We
the
have the
detention
natural pattern.
basin's taking that.
Correct. The
Wait.
detention basin's taking that, but then we also have that great distance to Talmadge Road that remains in the natural state unchanged, so that those natural patterns remain for the discharge. So,
Okay.
and again, there's no increase in either direction, and there's water quality treatment to the current DEP standards for both directions.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want Mr. Bowman
Sure.
has been asked questions.
in looking at the map that you provided us, to the break point on Wallingford Road flowing east and west is actually in front of, I believe 668 Wallingford Road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's a great point.
And there, in this general vicinity, there are 3 watersheds. Is that correct? You've got the Broad Brook, the Quinnipiac, and the Mill River.
On a macro scale,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Both are correct, yeah.
Also, Mr. Mercado?
On the easterly side, where's that water run? Does that go towards St. Charles?
Correct. There's some area of the Charles Drive area that drains through the subject property to the wetland area, and that's going to be maintained. We're not changing any of those natural drainage patterns that flow through the site. So that's if you look on, unfortunately, I'm sorry, the sheet's not highlighted that you have, but on sheet WS2, there's this area here of Charles Drive that drains through the site, and we're not going to interrupt that. It's going to continue to drain through the site. So there's no flow that's blocked by this development or interrupted. The drainage patterns are maintained.
Oh, Mr. Mercado.
On the southerly side of that, where does that drain?
There's, right in this area here, there's a pair of catch basins at the low point of Charles Drive, and this area drains toward this catch.
Does anything off of this property drain
Could
into
you
there?
turn that for us so that we can see it now, so we can ask our questions?
Yes, absolutely. So this line here, there's a stone wall, and it's, and the tree lines that are there, it serves as a ridge point between the watersheds. So this area drains towards Charles Drive, this area drains this way.
Okay.
The exception being here, where
All drains of it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Natale?
2 questions, a little bit different for both. So Mr. Wade asked a question at the last meeting about an intermittent stream that wasn't referenced. I've looked, I can't find it. Is there an intermittent stream on the property that is not on the maps that we don't see?
Within the wetland area, there are, there's micro topography, if you will. There's inundations, and there's a intermittent water course within the wetland regulated area that leads to the culvert on Talmadge Road. Earlier in the spring, there was more flow. I don't know this summer now, at certain times it may have gone dry, but I agree it would be classified as an intermittent water course. That's within the wetland system. It's within what's mapped. The contours depict it.
And is that being interrupted at all?
No. No.
Okay. The second question was the property at, give me 1 second. Across the street in Wallingford Road, I think it's 635. Yes. Laura Clark? Yes. And she had concerns regarding. Let's see, hold on 1 second, Marilyn. I've got 635 as the address.
6 feet.
Okay.
So the record, it's 635, 649, 631, all the same.
Gotcha. So Mrs. Clark's property on Longford Road, easement. So she had concerns about the water that currently collects there, goes across the street. Is there going to be additional water that collects for her? She had indicated that the catch basins catch it and empties into her yard. So if they're using the same catch basins, is that going to increase the water in her yard?
No, we have, again, using that culvert on Wallingford Road as the collection point from our water where it would join that system. We've modeled no increase in runoff discharge rates to that culvert.
But for the record, you've modeled a decrease in that
Correct.
culvert.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, so
In
it's
the
a
peak discharge,
decrease
there's a
instead of-
decrease.
Okay, so she, and I know you're not responsible for decreasing the amount of water, but from
In
what you're
this,
saying.
in
from-
this modeling case, it does decrease those peak discharge rates. So there's
Okay.
actually a decrease, exceeding the standard of no increase. Correct.
Is that the 70% that's on the chart?
That's correct.
Anyone else? Mr. Bowman?
I just want to be certain, and this is for Mr. Voker. This plan was reviewed by an independent contractor for the town of Cheshire, studying
That's correct.
on our behalf, the town's behalf,
Yeah, every version of it.
everything that is
yeah,
put into this
Right.
and read into this record.
Yes, from what was originally submitted to all through their revisions. Yes, 100%.
Thank you.
In fact, the letter that he includes here, we have that from Barton Low Judice. It's in the, what you just got from them. It basically, he acknowledges that. But they've reviewed every, from when it first came in until through tonight. They've seen every version of it.
Thank you.
Very interesting. I lived there and it was wet forever. So all of a sudden it dried up, so I couldn't say nothing.
How deep is the detention basin?
It's about 4 feet to the maximum height that would be ever experienced.
Okay, and what's the length and the width? I mean, what would the indentation be?
I'm looking at probably about 100 feet on that southerly line. It's sort of a triangular shape,
Yeah,
and 60 feet.
so maybe 40,000 square feet?
Yes,
Is that approximate?
approximate. Yeah.
Okay,
And again, I guess just to go back on stormwater basins and how they work, they're essentially this is more than just a detention basin. I don't like to use that word because that doesn't address water quality. But it's, just sort of the basics of it. It's like a big bathtub. The water is going to rush in, but you've got a constricted flow for how it comes out. And so the water rushes in, it'll fill up, but it's released at a rate, in this case, 25% less than the rate that exists today. So it works like a bathtub to control that rate. The stormwater basin also does treatment. It does all these other features, but
mhm.
it's basically a bathtub where you've got a rush of water in and you hold it to release it at a controlled rate.
Mr. Dawson.
How do you calculate that when if an area is all red rock and hard pan?
Great.
I know that area.
Yeah.
I owned a lot of
Yep.
land up there one time.
Is-
How do you calculate, there's a stream that ran through there and around and back down and connected to Wallingford Road, and then
Sure.
they put the catch basins in there.
Yeah, excellent.
So, and like you're saying, you're guaranteeing a 100-year flood.
Yep.
When there was times you couldn't even walk back there. 100-year storm.
Right.
I'm sorry. You're
Right.
Thank you for correcting me.
No, excellent question. Within the stormwater management report, there is a table. They use what's called a C value, which corresponds to the coverage for the site. So you would have a wooded area with what's called type A soil. So it's the coverage and it's the type of soil. That would have a runoff coefficient of about 0.2. So for simplicity, 20% of the rain that falls runs off. And then you have pavement, which would be 95 to 100% of what falls from the sky runs off. And then there's factors in between. Now, in this particular site, you're right, the soils are not type A. They're a mixture of B and even C type soils, and that's taken into account. So those get a higher runoff coefficient, as it's called. Also, this site presently is a lot more lawn than wooded area for the areas where the development's taking place. Lawn has a higher runoff coefficient than a wooded area where the rainfall is intercepted by leaves, has to travel down the tree, it takes longer, gets taken up from the root system. So those are all taken into account in the model. It's the runoff coefficients, and again, the DeKalb rational method model we used, and the TR55 method for the runoff. So there's a tremendous amount of studies on that to try to come up with it, and they keep getting better. And with this latest model that has it geographically located specifically to Cheshire, the numbers are very precise to even a particular area. So we've got a lot of information to do it well.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? Commission? Okay, I think you answered all the questions about, what did you call it, not detention basin? What was your word for it?
Stormwater basin, because it's
Stormwater basin? Okay. I'll correct it on my piece of paper. All right, and then I think we addressed that. Consider. Oh, I know what else. Okay, so I know that in your testimony, you talked about if they built 17 houses or 17 lots there, what the runoff would be. In that kind of type of development, is there still a stormwater basin in that kind of development?
There would, because your regulations require the same standard of zero increase in runoff. So with a subdivision, you would have, the same standard would have to be met. The difference is that with this development, we treat all of it before it gets to the wetlands, and then we have that uninterrupted open space from where the stormwater basin is all the way to Talmadge Road. So it's going to mimic the natural conditions that are there. It's going to continue to flow in the same patterns, the same manners. The subdivision alternative has development or potentially development from Talmadge Road. So there's going to be changes to that field area. There's going to be changes to the runoff immediately adjacent to Talmadge Road, albeit we'd still have to meet the same standard, but at least we have, with this type of development, a greater natural distance for that flow to continue in the same way it always has.
So it has a place to go
Correct,
without an overflow.
correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from commission members? No. All right, I think that
If-
I'm looking here and I really appreciate you giving your testimony. And I know that Mr. Fazzone wants to finish off some stuff. I'd like you, if you can come back if I need to answer
Absolutely,
questions.
I'll be here. I just had
appreciate
two more
you doing a
items.
Great
in-
job. Thank you very much.
I just had two more items in the letter. If
Okay,
you'd like, I'll
thank
just
you.
be very brief, but there were comments about landscaping. So to clarify in the landscaping, it will be a 4-foot-high landscape berm. I'm not sure that was clear from the last presentation, but it's depicted on your plans to help with the screening of shrubs and trees on top of the berm. We've put grading and detailed information for that. Also, the areas of the vinyl privacy fence
Mhm.
are from Wallingford Road, the westerly and easterly property lines running up from Wallingford Road. That's where we continue to have the vinyl fence. On the easterly side, it's adjacent to the emergency access. So we didn't feel there was enough space to have proper vegetation there, but we want to maintain the privacy between the two properties. And on the westerly side, coming up to Unit 2 would be a fence. North of that, on both sides, both the easterly property line and the westerly property line, we're showing rows of Atlantic cedars. We've got the space for a more natural buffer. It's an evergreen planting native to the area that provides year-round screening. And again, the stone wall and the existing mature trees on the easterly property line are all to be maintained. And with the previous presentation, we increased that from 27 feet to, I believe, a minimum of 38 feet on both property lines to have more distance to allow for these plantings and spacing. And then just lastly, I know I mentioned it before, but to be very clear, the site is designed to be balanced, meaning with the site earthwork, the amount of cut work with the site material and fill work is to be balanced. That includes the basements. That's modeled on sheet G3 of your set. There's a color modeling of that shows the cuts and the fills, and that does include the material that would be part of the excavation for the basements. That's accounted for. So the intent is that from the site grading would be with all the material that's there. It's a balanced site, so it's not that material is coming on or off the site with the site earthwork, but it's designed to be balanced.
Is there an amount of material that is coming off the site that we have a number?
We're showing that through the model.
I think that was another question, how many, how much?
Yeah, it's on
stuff?
sheet G3. The model comes up with 3,600 cubic yards, which works out to 2 inches per surface area. So the intent is that it's just balanced. There's nothing coming in or off the site.
There's nothing coming off the site at all?
Nope.
So that means there's no dump trucks going up and down on Wallingford?
Well, there'll be construction.
I know, but I'm just saying they're not
materials.
hauling out material or
Correct.
bringing in material.
Correct.
That's
Right.
huge.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Because that's a main complaint of everybody here, I think, in the room, of thinking that trucks will be going up and down the road and hauling it all day. That's
Right.
what
No, it's-
nobody wants.
Mr. Fazzone can detail why there's an earth excavation permit for your regulations because of I think the proximity of the
I think
right
it's
of
over
way.
2,000. Yeah.
Well, I think because of the distance, the proximity of the earthwork to the right of way, we have to file the permit for that application, but the intent is not to have material removed from the site. Um, He'll, I'm sure, detail that in
Okay.
his
Thank you
presentation.
for that.
Were there any other questions on that before I turn it back to?
Does
Mr.
anyone else
Fasone?
have any questions on that? The other commission members? No? You do? Oh, Mr. Bucato.
So on the entrance to the property, there's the two berms. If say that first house was not to be there and not built, would you be able to fill in the east and west with more trees to block it from the side of the road? I know a lot of people had issues with seeing that, thinking that it'll hurt property values or other establishments or developments in town. It seems set back. You don't see it right off the roads.
That first unit is over 100 feet back from the right of way, so it's about 100 and there's another 15 feet or so to the pavement. So it's roughly 120 feet from the pavement to the first unit. There's a 4-foot high berm in between. There's with the plantings above that to screen it. So the intent is that all of that would block the view of that first unit. Also with the redesign, we previously had 3 units that were close to that 100-foot mark. Now we've got just the one. So we tried to reduce the number of units, increase the berm height and the screening so that it would not be visible from the road.
Thank you.
Is that it?
I have a question.
Okay. Mr. Vazon.
Where you're within 50 feet, for example, of Wallingford Road doing the excavation, would you be able to state that that would not create a substantial risk of damage to the abutting property, this type of excavation? Maybe describe this, the grading
Okay.
that has to take place there.
Sure.
Could you repeat his questions? Because I don't know if, did you pick it up?
Actually,
Okay. So I believe the question was if, please, thank you.
With respect to one of the waivers that's being sought, the commission has to determine that such activity, this is the grading to match up with the road,
Yep.
would not involve or create a substantial risk of damage to the abutting property. And it's just kind of a technicality that you get because this earth removal regulation was really designed for an excavation permit, someone hauling, mining.
Yeah, mining. That's
Sure.
what, that's what I said. Like
Right.
it's a technicality here.
Yes, from a professional engineering standpoint, I'm comfortable in saying that this would not have a negative impact on the abutting properties. The berm, the start of the berm is just at 50 feet, so even the berm construction is beyond that 50-foot limit. And the transition between the berm and the right-of-way of Wallingford Road, the grading that occurs there maintains all the same drainage patterns. So there's no adverse impact to abutting properties caused by the grading.
Okay. Mr. Vazone, you had more to add. I'm going to let you finish up and then I'm going to let the public speak. Could you leave all that up? Thank you. Because I know people might want to come up and point out stuff.
I don't believe that it's necessary for me to go through each and every item in the exhibit that I presented. However, there were a couple of those categories that were specifically mentioned. Some of them are very simple. Does the project meet the requirements of a portion of the regulation? For example, is it more than 10 acres? It is. Is it located in an R40 zone? It is. Does it have public water and sewer? It does. So some of those that you'll see in this exhibit are pretty self-explanatory. One of the ones that was specifically pointed out was the item F. It's on page 2 of the exhibit. And the regulation says you have to consider the need exists in the community for a different type of housing unit that is allowed under the base zone. And I would just go over that for the record, that the Plan of Conservation Development recognizes that the population of the town continues to increase. It's higher now than it was in 2002 when the regulation was adopted. You have a report from Wellspeak, Dugas, and Kane showing a study of the market area and that there would definitely be a market for these types of units. Interesting that there hasn't been an age-restricted housing development approved in Cheshire since 2005. In that same period of time, a little over 360 single-family residential building subdivisions, 360 lots in the subdivision have been approved. The Plan of Conservation Development, the current one, page 23 states, it's the principle of the plan to provide a variety of housing types which offer a choice to meet the needs of various income levels and lifestyles. The other section pointed out was subparagraph G. And this is the development and design of the age-restricted planned residential development will not have an adverse effect on surrounding properties, will be in harmony with the neighborhood, and will not have an adverse effect on property values in the area. The proposed development will not create an undue concentration of PRDs, particularly age-restricted PRDs. Well, first off, it's an application for a residential use in a residential R40 zone. And when the regulation was adopted, the commission thought that these should be eligible for all of the R zones, including from R20, R40, and R80. Interestingly, this property abuts the Copper Beach Road subdivision. That's a cluster subdivision,
Yes, it
which
is.
allows for higher density. It's also in an R40 zone, which requires almost an acre of land. And in the Copper Beach subdivision, there are lots as small as 0.57 acres. As far as impact on the area, the applicant has provided for a 38-foot setback from the adjacent properties on Charles Drive. A standard R40 subdivision would have a setback of 40 feet. So this is fairly similar to the conventional subdivision. The applicants provided for boundaries, buffering along the boundaries of the adjacent residential properties. If this were an R40 conventional subdivision, there would not have to be a buffer and the backyards could be cleared up to the property lines. It was mentioned a short while ago, this has a setback from Wallingford Road of 100 feet. And an R40 would only be required to be 40 feet back from the street line. In response to a question, Mr. Quirk described the significant buffering and plantings from Wallingford Road. And in terms of no impact on the abutting properties, you've heard extensive testimony on detention of the stormwater runoff on the site in the engineer's opinion that there's now going to be zero increase in runoff from the site. The traffic report says there's no significant difference between this proposed development in a conventional R40 subdivision development, in that there'd be no 34 units would have no significant effect on Wallingford Road. As to property values, there is really no empirical evidence that these types of development have a negative effect on values of neighboring properties. I did some research in the assessor's office, including a conversation with the assessor, and I was assured that there's no factor that the assessor applies to property values because homes are located near an age-restricted planned residential development. Probably the best example would be of one directly abutting is Carriage House Commons on Cheshire Street, which abuts North Pond Road. Interestingly, since Richmond Glen was approved, 2 new subdivisions in the immediate proximity of Richmond Glen is one is Baxter Court, which I guess is about maybe an 8-lot subdivision that is built with fairly large size homes, and that was put in after Richmond Glen was approved. And the commission just approved shortly Orchard View subdivision at the on Weiss Road and South Main Street. Bill Kane of Wellspeak, Dugas and Kane has some experience in researching impact on property values. Bill's here. He has a very brief comment to make.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. My name is Bill Kane for the record. I'm with Wellspeak, Dugas and Kane, again, the firm that did the market study for this development. I've been in the business for 40 years and our office has been in Cheshire for the entire 40 years. So my entire career has been here in Cheshire. But Anthony, at the last meeting, there was a couple of comments that there were concerns that their property values might decrease by being near an age-restricted housing development. And I recently did a study in Middlebury for another a larger scale, more densely developed age-restricted housing development. And the same question came up and we handled that with an impact study. And basically what we did is we went around the state trying to find towns that were kind of similar in character to Middlebury, and then looked at age-restricted housing developments in those areas, found sales of properties that were abutting those age-restricted developments, and then compared those with similar dwellings that didn't have any influence of an age-restricted development in the other neighborhoods. And we studied developments in Cheshire, Middletown, Portland, and Southbury. One of the ones that most surprising was Southbury because Heritage Village was the subject in that case.
Yeah,
And we looked at sales around Heritage Village. Now that's 2,500 units in Heritage Village. So you would think if there's an impact, Heritage Village would pretty much show you that there's an
Is that
impact.
all over 55 Heritage Village?
It's all over 55.
Okay.
In a very, very dense development.
Mhm.
And we found 3 or 4 sales of properties along the roadways around Heritage Village, and then compared those to various sales in Southbury, similar quality homes, similar neighborhoods, to try to eliminate as many factors as possible. And we did that in these other 4 developments as well. And basically it showed that there was absolutely no impact on value from being proximate. When I say proximate, it had to be adjacent to these developments to really see if there's any impact. So overall, the study showed that there was no impact to value by being adjacent to an age-restricted housing development, even some that are way more dense than what you're talking about here on this development. So those are my comments.
Mr. Bowman, you have a question? Oh, Mr. Linder.
Let me ask you a question. How would you compare the applicant's house design, the architecture that's being proposed to Stonegate, Castle Heights, Richmond Glen, Regency in Prospect, those particular styles of 55 and over communities?
I really haven't studied exactly the differences between each one of those projects that you mentioned. But generally, age-restricted housing is designed similar to what's being designed for this project. You generally have smaller homes, people who are age-restricted, they're looking to downsize a little bit. They're usually selling a larger house. They don't want to maintain lawns and they don't want to maintain things. So the lots end up being smaller. Some of the developments are very dense. They're condominiums and they're zero lot lines. They're right on top of each other. So they are desirable. It's very similar to some of the ones you mentioned, and from the design that I saw.
Well, I take issue with that. Are you saying that what you're proposing has similar architecture and variety as Richmond Glen?
Not Richmond Glen. I mean, like I said, I haven't studied each one of these
Well, I mean,
developments.
the 55 and over communities that I'm mentioning are a more upscale kind of development, Castle Heights.
Yes, I think, yeah,
Richmond Glen.
absolutely. The price point on those
Yeah.
are much higher
Right.
than what's being proposed.
So you wouldn't put the applicant's design on par with those developments?
No, I mean, if some of those that you mentioned, they're getting prices of $700,000. So,
Exactly.
and they're successfully being sold at that price. These units would have much more marketability because they're a little bit smaller units and they don't have the design features that you'd have. in
Well,
some
I
of
don't
those.
want to argue with you, but you just contradicted yourself. You're saying that the $700,000 units are selling very well, but yet you're proposing $450,000 units that are also going to sell well. Wouldn't it be better if the applicant built 700,000 less $700,000 units and maybe come out with roughly the same revenue?
That's the developer's choice. I
Yeah, but I'm just
suppose.
saying that's a choice though.
That's a choice, yes.
Right.
And
Okay.
This project would have much more marketability to even residents of Cheshire who may not be able to afford the $700,000 house, but they could afford a
Oh,
$460,000.
Yeah, I wouldn't
house.
argue with that, but then again, there is a market for $600,000 to $700,000 55 plus houses.
Those will actually sell at a much slower rate, but
But there's
there
a-
is a market for them.
Yes, right. Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Desco?
Mine was going
Did
to
you
be
come
for
back?
Mr. Fazone. so-
Oh, okay, Mr. Zone is coming up right now.
Mr. Fazone, our regulations do talk about addressing whether the project will be in harmony with the neighborhood. I'd like to it seems that that's what the neighbors are addressing as much as anything else, whether a project such as this, which is a specialized type of housing with higher density, is in harmony with a single-family area. And it is true, I think this is really a single-family area all around. Could you just address the harmony issue?
Well, first off, it is a residential use. And it's in a residential neighborhood. I think that there's certainly nothing offensive about this. It's will be well maintained. I'm about to introduce a document that talks about maintenance of the common areas. It's set back from the road. I think on the negative aspect, I don't see where it's not in harmony with the neighborhood.
Well, I mean, do you think it, and again, I'm not coming to any conclusion sitting here, but do you think it defeats any expectations, or what is the importance of the expectations perhaps of neighbors of a certain type of zoning and a certain type of housing that would exist in an area based on the historical zoning patterns. I mean, this is a change of zone. It's not, which makes it a little bit more of a significant issue for the commission, I think.
Do you not think that the commission, when they adopted the regulation, took that into consideration when they allowed these to be built in any of the residential neighborhoods?
Well, I don't.
I think
I
almost-
think the commission probably did consider that, yes, but it seems to me that is an issue that can be raised and is an issue for consideration and decision each time an application is presented.
That's correct. I agree with that. I think that, well, I guess other than size and price of the homes, I don't see where it's not in harmony with the neighborhood. Some of these houses, some of these units will sell for more than some of the houses on Charles Drive are currently selling for.
Right.
And it's a standalone, well buffered, gives itself, as I said, the buffering from the neighborhood. It's not a high rise. They're individual units. They're single family units in a condominium form.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a chance to address those.
Thank you.
Mr. Natale.
Attorney Fazone, I want to go back to the question on spot zoning. So Mr. Wachowski, who's also an attorney, has indicated some case law or given us some case law about spot zoning being applicable to only small areas. From what you're saying, the 24 acres is not a small area. Bill, with the state, is there anything that defines what that small area is, or is it left to interpretation?
There's no standard for that. It's generally what you'll find in cases where spot zoning has been held. Those are the typical standards. It's usually a small piece of property. Then when the zone is enacted, it's significantly different than what's around it. Those are the general characteristics of spot zoning. So there's no state definition for it. But in land use law, typically spot zoning involves small properties.
More frequently, you might see.
I was going to add, I
Tresco.
mean, this is apart from the harmony question. I don't think this is spot zoning. I think this zoning is consistent with the overall plan of conservation, plan in Cheshire, which contemplates this kind of a project. So in certain areas that are defined areas, so we've kind of decided if this particular project is in one of the areas that we've decided it could be built, I think it's by definition almost not spot zoning at that point.
Gotcha,
But
thank you.
I can't give a legal opinion, but
Thank you. Like I said, I just had to see a difference in opinion between two attorneys. So I wanted to see if the state had any specifications.
Anyone else?
I want to introduce another exhibit with respect to the stormwater management system. This will be a condominium subject to a declaration of condominium, and it will have, in that declaration, there will be language similar to what we've done with subdivisions, which have these stormwater management facilities, and requiring that people living in those subdivisions belong to the homeowners association, and they have to pay their part. And if the association does not maintain the detention basin, then the town has the right to go in and do the maintenance that's necessary and charge all that back to the homeowners association and individual homeowners. In this case, just want to submit the language that would be similar. This is from Clearview subdivision off of Mountain Road. The language in the condominium declaration would be exactly similar to, I don't know if that's the right adverb, but would be pretty much the same, describing what they have to maintain. And it's items 16 and 17 on the exhibit for the commission to consider.
Mr. Ricardo has a quick question, Mr. Fazone.
Who enforces that? And when that work is done, is it reported to the town? So is that how it's enforced? How do we know if it hasn't been completed? And when the town can step in?
Well, one of the recommendations, which the applicant has said he's willing to go along with, is that the town be able to inspect the construction of the, it is different in that there's not a road to be inspected, but the town would be given access to that if all of a sudden there's overflow down onto Talmadge Road. The town would have the right to go in and inspect to see that it's maintained and is operating properly.
But is there a yearly, every
It's
3
supposed to be
year,
done.
5 year, some kind of maintenance that gets done or
They-
looked at?
Yeah, it's supposed to be done on a periodic basis, every year or so. There's not a lot to do to maintain these. They need to be mowed around, and siltation built up has to be removed, much like a catch basin has to be maintained.
Is there any report that's reported back to the town?
Mr. Quirk advised me there's a schedule of maintenance in the plans. I don't know that it has to be reported to the town. It certainly could be. I think it's not.
I just hate to see something happen where, it overflows or has some issues and, other people that live in that area start getting flooded out more than normal.
Not this
Mr. Bowman has
document.
a quick question too. So,
Rob, normally that's taken care of with the inland wetlands approval, that has to be cleaned every so often. It's usually one of the conditions of their approval.
But how's it reported back? How do we know that that's getting taken care of? The enforcement side of it, is it just via
to the engineering
reports?
department, there would public works, whatever.
Like they said, there's a periodic cleaning, and if there's no one from the town is going to go out and inspect it.
I have a question for the applicant, Mr. Lovely. On your other, we've never dealt with you in Cheshire, so we have no idea. And I know you do developments in Southington. On your other developments in Southington, they have a homeowners association. Do those people pay dues, and the association is like a condo complex, or is it just like here where you're an association and it kind of like, that's, you're just in the association? It's not, is it more formatted where they have an insurance policy? Is there, what's the type of association that is usually in your developments?
Okay, perfect. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, fellow commissioners. Mark Lovely, president of Lovely Development with offices at 710 Main Street, Plantsville. I've been building for 36 years and doing these type of developments. And in the condo association documents, which even though this is a freestanding standalone unit, it acts as the same way. We have bylaws and we have maintenance schedules and everything in there. These homes do pay a condo fee.
Okay.
What
That's
happens is, and there is a maintenance schedule that goes along in that document that states different things that have to be done per the town approvals and inspections. we've even had some in other ones where the town asked, hey, can you have the association give us a reporting yearly of what this has been done? And we did that in some of those documents, because you change those out, cater them to each development.
Yes.
Like in this house, the 2 developments I just did in Sellington, their fee monthly is $198.50 for both those development. Includes all the mowing, cleaning of the detention basins, the plowing, the shoveling of the walks.
Now part of that payment they make, right? Is there some kind of insurance policy that this is my concern?
Yep.
And I know that people were talking about runoff or whatever, and that,
Mhm.
and that we've discussed that in the presentation from the engineer's been very good, very good. But my thing is there, have you ever had in one of your developments when there was a problem and they could go against the homeowner association? Has that ever happened?
There
You
is
ever had that experience?
the association does carry insurance, and it has to carry liability insurance and director's insurance
From an
also, 'cause
abutting
they're-
property owner. That's what I'm
Exactly.
at. Have you ever had a problem where a budding property owner had a problem with your development and they were able to go against it?
in 36 years, I've not had one.
Okay, I just want to know, but you do have, that's part of the thing. You'd have insurance
Exactly.
for that.
Yep, exactly.
Okay,
And I've
that
built.
that was my quick question. I'm that was a concern for me because I want to protect all the people that are around you.
No, and we're willing to work with town staff to make sure everything gets done right on T.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. All right. Thank you very much for the answer. Okay, now we're gonna ask the public to come up and ask questions we've been waiting to ask. Just give your name and address for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Robert Wachowski, WICHOWSKI, 685 Wallingford Road. Also of Bendett and McHugh, BENDETT, and McHugh, MCHUGH, of 270 Farmington Avenue, Farmington, Connecticut. Good evening. First, I would just like to object to all of these submissions that Attorney Vazone submitted here tonight. According to the rules, they had to be filed within 10 days of the hearing. That wasn't done. It's more to set up a record for the PZC in the Superior Court. To take issue with something that Attorney Vazone says, that the wetlands consideration is not properly before the commission, I will object to that as well. 43.4.4 sets a list of findings that the commission must consider in rendering its decisions, one of those findings being subsection H, saying that the proposed development will not have a significant adverse effect on the environmental wetlands and water courses. So any decisions regarding the wetlands is properly before the commission and not strictly the providence of the IWWC. Second, to address a couple of the other matters that Attorney Vazone stated, it just struck me that one of the findings that the commission must make is that there's not an inordinate number of PUDs or ARPDs within geographical distance to this. Just Richmond Glen, Baxter Cove, Orchard View, many of them actually abut the property. It does seem to be that there is an inordinate amount of PUDs that directly abut this. 2 ARPDs within a mile as the crow flies of this property. I think Orchard View is one of them, or Carriage Grove. But there is an abundance of these developments that's already existing close to this property. I am not an engineer. My eyes glazed over when the applicant's engineer spoke. I went to law school. I care about applying the facts to the law, as Attorney Fazone does as well. And I will take particular note that the law that you gentlemen have to apply the facts to is 43.4.4. Like I mentioned some of those ordinances a little bit earlier, but you gentlemen have to make a finding that the applicant's application for this zoning change hits every one of those. And like I stated before, subsection C, provisions for traffic, weather, sewage, stormwater, and open space are adequate and do not create water problems off-site. Subsection F, the need exists in the community for a different type of housing unit than is allowed under the base zone. The base zone in this area is R40. There is no need for additional ARPDs in this when 1 acre lots can easily accomplish the goals that the developer is trying to meet here. There is no compelling need for this zoning change under the rules. they state that a need exists in the community for a different type of housing unit than is allowed under the base zone. That's what the rules state. To show that a need exists, the Attorney Fazone states that there was not one of these approved in 2005. Respectfully, I think that proves exactly the opposite. That one of these has not been approved for that long shows that there is no need in the community for this. And types of housing of this sort can easily be put on R40 without the need of a zoning variance. Attorney Vazone also stated that the plan of conservation and development states that the population increases. That's fine. Obviously, the population is increasing, but there's no need to change this from an R40 to an ARPD. Subsection G, development and design of the ARPD will not have an adverse effect on the surrounding population. Like I stated, it abuts in PRD, 2 others within a mile. Subsection H, the proposed development will not have a significant adverse effect on environmental, particularly wetlands and watercourses. I believe Mr. Wage submitted a letter to that effect, but just to rebut the fact that this commission does not have jurisdiction to consider the inland wetlands considerations, that's not true. Considering that is one of the specific findings that the commission must make. And just to be clear, I was present at the other hearing. I believe there was some confusion regarding the traffic report. From my perspective, it seems that the traffic report that was done by the town of Cheshire was done in June of 2019. Is that correct?
It was several months. It was over a several-month period.
Over the course of several month period,
Yes.
not during July, right? And not during the pandemic, correct?
No, it was this year. I think it was April, May, June, or May, June.
Of 2020?
Of this, this of 21. It was just recently.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, just recently. So,
Okay.
I mean, the traffic is done. I mean, the traffic, we know it's not, this kind of develop is not going to add any more traffic than
Yeah,
a
the-
regular base development.
That was just something that occurred to me because hearing the evidence, I had assumed that the traffic study that was done by the town was in 2019, but the ones provided by the applicant was the one that was
No, that
recently
traffic
done.
study was done by the police department. And that was a recent traffic study. And then it was
Okay.
comparison between that traffic, and that is pretty much, we're good.
My mistake.
Yep.
The impact study, I believe Commissioner Linder adequately addressed that. One thing that wasn't addressed is whether the impact study that was done compared the value of the properties to what was existing on the various lands before the ARPDs of those other towns was in there. There was no evidence before the commission that in this situation, based on what the property is there currently, will have a positive or negative effect on the surrounding properties here. Other than that, I think that's all I have.
Okay,
Thank you very much, commissioners.
thank you.
Matt Wade, 669 Wallingford Road. I didn't submit an early email, which is nice for me, I guess. But I did prepare. If I can just find the right page. So, a couple of things. First, on the wetlands. Mr. Bowman, you commented that you wanted to know who ran the 2 wetlands meetings. There were 2 wetlands meetings on April 20th and May 4th. Both were chaired by Dr. Dimmick, who's a very good soil scientist, geologist. He's a very talented individual. Determinations can only be made, though, on the quality of the information that you're given. The report that was referenced, which was done on May 4th and given to the Wetlands Committee on May 4th, they were unable to review that prior to that May 4th meeting, even though that report was prepared and done on April 2nd. Additionally, I gave you guys a letter on the wetlands dated July 2nd. And within that letter, I quoted Calhoun and Clemens and their work that's been done in this area. Matt Sanford also quoted that exact same paper, which is the Calhoun and Clemens paper of 2002, which covers developments within residential and commercial settings with dealing with wetlands with vernal pools. Matt Sanford originally went in only to verify the wetland boundary as put in by, I think his name is Andrew Webb or somebody in 2016. He went in on one day, March 31st, and one day only to do an environmental assessment of a wetlands that it contains vernal pools you cannot do in one day. In fact, in his report, he even states, I just did it for one day. A real environmental assessment would take weeks. There's also what they call the critical habitat area, which both vernal pools that are there share the same critical habitat area. So whatever's good for one pool is also good for the other pool. So if one's a tier 2, the other's also a tier 2. We classified the one as a tier 2, farthest from the development, and a tier 3 closest to the development where the storm basin is. Storm basins are, let me, real quick, I'm going to see if I can do this quickly. Where the vernal pool is, in that actual vernal pool, there's a 100-foot envelope from the edge of the vernal pool extending outward. Best conservation practices, you do not disturb that area at all. You just don't go near it. Outside of that, if you're doing a storm basin, you want to be within 750 feet, you can go into 350, you can move that around. You know, because they're saying development happens, this is what you have to do. In this particular development, there's two factors to the storm basin. One is it's 23 feet from the inland boundary, and it actually has a spillway at 305 feet or 308 feet that goes directly into the vernal pool that drains into the, if you know the two fields and you're facing up from Talmadge, the inland water course that I was talking about in my documentation runs between those two fields. There's like a short field, a line of trees, then the long field. The inland water course that's not on the prints, and thank you for reading my email, comes right down that side. And I've got video of it. There's actually a scored thing. So if you step off the curb, you'll drop down about 1.5 feet into what they call a scored channel. The storm basin, somebody asked a question what the elevations on that, is that 309 is the top elevation. The bottom elevation is 303 feet. Again, I have to kind of object about when we get this information. And for the wetlands people, they missed a lot of information that could have been given to them prior or after this, because the documentation exists that they would come up with a different decision on. In fact, Dr. Dimick, twice on the May 4th thing, said, we need a public hearing. We need a public hearing. For whatever reason, they had no public hearing. May 18, they approved it. And I'm going to fight wetlands on that. On June 4th, print G4 came out, which shows you, the elevation and stuff for the pits that were dug that the engineer reviewed. Right where that storm basin is, it shows modeling at 27 inches. The start elevation of that storm drain or the storm basin was 310 feet, which means when you go down 27 inches, you hit modeling of the soil. If you go down 40 inches, you actually found groundwater. Now, what does that mean? Modeling of soil is indicative of soil that has a high water point. In other words, if you want to find out if you're digging a septic system, you dig down, you find modeling at 12 inches, that's where the groundwater is at its highest in the spring and the fall. It then drops and then comes up. It stays at that level too, which is important to know, because the way it models is by bacteria, whether it be anaerobic or aerobic bacteria, a whole nother story. So in the spring, that storm basin is going to be below the high water mark. It will be full of water because the high water mark is about 308. In fact, when they took their tours, which was on May 2nd and 3rd, when Dr. Dimick and a few other people actually went to the wetlands, they said, we see the groundwater coming up, and the groundwater is coming up at 308 feet, as a base elevation. Matt Sanford also said that the groundwater is moving from going northwest, which would go out to the culvert farther down that goes by the that little road that passes through. There's the alpaca farm. There's a culvert that goes underneath there that goes across and that feeds out to the Quinnipiac water basin. That's where that feeds. The one that's halfway down by the fields, the culvert that goes across, the guy that owns the little pond and everything, that feeds the Mill River basin. So in the spring, when all the water is saturated, that storm basin is going to be full, And whatever accumulates is going to immediately flow out into the secondary vernal pool, or the one that's closest there, and literally just flow right down the property of Talmadge, and just there's nothing that's going to stop it, because you're below the high water point naturally, and basically when it rains, it's going to collect that water and it's just going to shoot it right down that side. I mean, that's the logistics of it. There's never been a hydrology study done. There's never been an environmental impact study done. What's that? The stormwater basin will be full. It has a spillover of 305 feet with an inlet of 305.2 and then an emergency overflow at 308. The top of the basin is at 309. It's on sheet D something or other. In fact, Mr. Quirk could probably answer that question. During the year, if it's August, it'll slow it down. Also, the Calhoun and Clemens, that I talked about earlier, basically the stormwater basins are a death trap, for amphibians and stuff, because they'll actually collect it. And they're supposed to be as far away from that as possible, because the amphibians will get confused. Okay, that's enough on the water side of it. My other point that I brought up in the first meeting here was the pedestrian, whatever they call it, where they walk around. And it came up that those guys thought about it and they said, well, we're thinking about doing it. So now they have one. I have to correct you. There is no sewer in that area right now. There isn't. You have to cut a sewer through, which you also, in my letter, I said you cannot supply a gravity feed sewer to the Sir Charles and whatever roads. It's impossible unless you put the sewer drop in the attic coming down. But it's not possible. So the pedestrian circulation and going across the wetlands, now you're looking at, I don't know whose responsibility it is, because that land's going to be deeded to the town. There's no stipulation of what kind of trail it is. There's no design except for it's sitting on stones, maybe concrete blocks, and it's pressure treated lumber in a wetland with Trex sitting up on top. And now you're talking about, the widows that always come up in conversation, walking their dogs so they can go to, a safer area than Wallingford Road. Who's maintaining that trail? Trex gets really slippery when it's wet. There's no design. There's 4 pages now on the sidewalk from the state. There's no design, no trail maintenance. And Mr. Fazzone is so happy about reading regulations, or the COPD or PCP, PO, whatever they call it, the conservation plan. It says, number 1, to protect and preserve, this is number 3 off of page 8. Protect and preserve Connecticut heritage areas, archaeological areas of regional and statewide significance, and natural areas, including habitats of endangered, threatened, and special concern species, which we don't know if we have that or not, because no environmental study was done. It also says, seek to achieve no net loss wetlands through development planning that, 1, avoids wetlands whenever possible. We can avoid going through the wetlands just by putting in standard development. People argue open space because this gives us more open space. Well, if you ever watch one of the wetlands, meetings, whatever, if you bought, how many acres of wetlands are on your property? She's got 4 acres of wetlands on her property. She can't put grass clippings in those wetlands. They're naturally protected, because you can own wetlands on your property. And you can sit there and say, I want to improve the wetlands. You got to get in a permit to improve the wetlands. So by putting in a standard development right there, you're protecting those wetlands, because we naturally protect our wetlands, and it provides a filter. Because once you put that walkway across, and once you can't do micro topography through a vernal pool wetland. The design of that wetland is to hold water, retain that water, and release it slowly. I took a video of that intermittent water course 24 hours after the storm, and it was still flowing. And it flows in the opposite direction of Matt Sanford, what he said. And when he directed the water people to go in there, he said, go to where my flags are. It's all flagged. Just go there. Where that trail goes through is 15 feet from the edge of the vernal pool. And it's going to prevent anything migrating to that pool. It's going to become a little swamp, little, mosquito breeding place or something. It's going to kill the wetlands. There's just no doubt about it. Yeah, I think that'll, yeah.
I'm looking at the map for drainage for Talmadge Road and for Copper Beach. And actually, I see that Talmadge Road from Copper Beach drains into the Mill River. And
The-
from Copper Beach,
When you go from Talmadge Road prior to Copper Beach, it goes to the Mill River watershed.
Yeah.
That's correct. If you go farther down, because there's two areas that it drains through. One goes through the back and the water travels from the northwest, comes down around the back of Copper Beach and drops in. There's a guy that has like a little pond there. That little pond goes to the Quinnipiac watershed. And the eastern side that comes down through the culverts that goes to 642, 6 whatever, her property, that goes to Broad Brook. That's the headwaters of the Broad Brook.
but none of the water coming off this subdivision are going to go to Broad Brook.
Yes, it does.
It's going to stay in the Mill River.
No, off the subdivision, here's what happens off the subdivision. If you look at we got it right here. Flip around. This area here, the blue area, goes to Broad Brook. That goes to the culvert between Thatcher.
Bring it closer to me, please.
What's that?
Could you bring that closer so it,
Oh,
You
you're
know.
like me, barely. I got the glasses. This goes Broad Brook. This up here, draining this way, goes Mill River. This going back through here, comes down the other side of Copper Beach, and then that goes to the Quinnipiac watershed. The other thing that Calhoun and Clemens says is you want net zero. In other words, no more water going into the wetland and no less water. So you dilute that by 25%. You're filling up groundwater, you're on top of mottled. It's going to be a mess.
modeling is nothing more to show that one time water flowed at that level.
No,
But-
modeling happens, it's a high point, it's used when determining septic systems, et cetera.
I have a subsurface disposal license. I know exactly what it does and how high above that it has to be. And modeling is an organic material that says that at one time water came up to that level and ran through that level. It doesn't mean that it does it every year. And according to this, according to what I'm looking at here on the drainage, this is staying in the Mill River. This is not going in any way, shape, or form to Broad Brook. And
The front goes to Broadbrook, the EX1. The Mill River is EX2, and it used to be, it's gonna get more water going to the Mill River. Easily. And if you look at the soil mapping, the 6B or 6, whatever the soil, the Wellburn, that drainage is right on the edge of wetland soil by the soil scientist markings, whatever.
I'm not gonna.
Well, I'll have you answer this one right now, since this has been going on for a while.
Again, Andrew Quirk, professional engineer, for the record. I was trying to take notes to keep up with all the comments that were here. And I really noted that a lot of these comments were part of the town engineering staff's same comments that were raised. I don't have, unfortunately, right in front of me, the comment response, but we received the comments and we had the direct comment responses and resolved those issues with town engineering staff. In particular, the issue of modeling and the depth to groundwater, there was a comment on the first review in terms of that location. And the test pit itself was closer to 307.5. The general bottom of the stormwater basin is 305.2. The further depths are the micro pools, which are part of that water quality treatment. The outlet and inlet for the pond are at 305.2. So we have these water quality treatment features, but the flow of the water is going to come out through that pipe at 305.2. We purposely went with an open pipe design. It's not a big outlet control structure with smaller knockouts and such. It's a 15-inch pipe that allows for the water to flow under that controlled modeled system, but through a pipe that is not going to have this water rise up to the spillway on a regular basis. That's something that would occur in a 100-year storm event as we modeled it. It's not going to happen on a regular basis. So that flow from the pipe is then directed towards the wetland system and flows through that natural pattern out to Talmadge Road. I can't really speak for Matt Sanford, but there was a significant discussion about the vernal pools. There were site walks by the individual site walks. That was the way they handled it at the time, that they went individually and commented on the vernal pool locations. The location of the sewer crossing there was a lot of discussion and thought in terms of where that would go to have the least impact on the mature trees that are there. That's part of the minutes that are there. A lot of this was addressed as part of that. The sewer commission, reviewed and the depths of the sewer so that it does provide gravity service to Charles Drive. That's the reason for the depth of the sewer that you see on the plans before you. It's deeper so that it purposely does serve that. That's what they wanted as part of that. That section of the sewer, again, is public sewer. It's not the sewer just for the development. The section that runs from the property line near Charles Drive through the development and the wetland crossing to Talmadge is a public sewer with an easement to the town so that it can be accessed by the town and could be extended to serve that. And it's at a depth that they wanted in order to provide that service. The open space and the trail system, that's all part of the homeowners association. This is not being deeded to the town. We did discuss.
That's what I thought. Okay.
We did discuss if the town, we are open to the idea if the town wanted to take an easement for further protection or further enforcement issues. Certainly the town has the right if there are wetland violations anyway without that such easement. But we did offer that over the entire open space. It could also be granted in the form of an easement to the town for further protection. The open space trail, as discussed, was supposed to be a nature walk, and that's why there's not a hard design for it. It's supposed to maintain that meadow area that's there.
So it could be grass, it could be just a
With
walk.
just,
Yeah.
we didn't want to interrupt that. We just want to keep what was there, and so it would be mowed twice a year just to prevent the tree growth, but keep it as a meadow. It was not supposed to be a extensive trail system, but just a nature walk. And Matt Sanford had extensive experience with it's really not a bridge, it's just a platform crossing at the sewer location in a wet part of the year that someone could walk across that. And that's why it's a softer design, if you will, in terms of the pressure treated and the Trex board just laid on rocks to allow the natural flow of water that's there, but just have an ability to make it a little bit more seasonal access. It's not intended that it, would be all year round, but at least to give a little bit more access during those wet times of the year. And I submit the comment and responses. They're on file for both rounds of engineering comments that dealt with a lot of these issues as well.
I appreciate you coming and giving the answer. Thank you very much. Awesome.
I think another thing that needs to be addressed to Mr. Wade's comment, I don't believe Dr. Dimick ever said during the meeting that the Wetlands Commission needed a public hearing. He did ask the question about whether or not the commission thought they needed a public hearing, and obviously it was determined that they didn't. And finally, the restoration plan here is significant that the Wetlands Commission determined was necessary.
Okay, thank you. Just your name and address for the record, please.
Michelle Fredericks, 36 Carroll Drive. I do apologize, I'm not as schooled as the previous gentleman. I just have a few things I'd like to bring up. First of all, my young grandson wanted to come tonight, but it's past his bedtime. Begging you not to let this happen because he's already afraid to walk on Talmadge Road where there's no sidewalks. You were comparing to Baxter Court. Baxter Court, you can't compare it to what this is intended. Baxter Court are beautiful homes. It's not condos. I mean, how do you stick condominiums in the backyard of people's homes? I just don't see it. It's just not suitable for that area. I'm not against 55 and older housing in town, but in the appropriate area that it goes. It just doesn't go there. It has like a fishbowl effect. Here's everybody's backyards, then you have condos stuck there. So to me, I don't think it looks right, but that's my opinion.
Okay.
I have no issue. I'm friendly with the Kurtz family. I have no issue with them making money. But
It's the applicant is Mr. Lovely, not the Kurtz family.
oh, okay, but they're
So
selling it
just-
to him.
Huh?
They're selling it to him.
But the
So-
applicant that we're
Okay,
dealing with,
all right,
Mr. Lovely,
fine.
so
I'll
that's,
skip that
you
part.
know,
That's
thank
fine.
you.
And with no disrespect, I asked Attorney Fazone, how would you like this in your backyard? You did not answer that. And then is it also going to open it up to the fact if your family's alpaca farm gets sold, will this also be able to get built on that property? If they sell the alpaca farm, will we get that over there also? off
That's not
Talmadge?
in this,
Right, I'm saying, but will it open it up if they
no,
change the zoning?
it's only, this is for this specific property.
But will it
That's
change
it.
zoning in the rest of the
No.
area?
It's this plan is for the density for this development.
Right.
Okay? And that's it. So it's not going to affect anybody else around it that they could jump on board. So that
Okay.
doesn't.
That's
okay?
one of my big things, but
No.
still, my opinion, just doesn't belong there.
But a clusters, you understand what a cluster zone is, right? So
Yes, I
like,
do.
If you were on Sir Walter Drive or what?
Carroll
what-
Drive,
You're in Carroll, okay. So in your development, when was your development built?
57.
50s, okay. And then Sir Walter, 60s, right? So now you go to Copper Beach, that's a cluster development. That means that their lots are smaller and there's open space. It's just like going from a 1955 Chevy to a 1985 Chevy to a 2020.
Right, but those are,
It's a different type of,
but those are homes on Copper Beach.
Understanding.
They're not,
but like I said, what's happened in Connecticut is, we're all getting older. The kids
No,
aren't
we're
really
not.
staying. We're all getting older.
it's all a matter of your
It's,
mind.
you
You're
know,
not getting older.
There's less school children, than there was. I mean, and the family houses that, that we all love, you know what I mean? Like I said, there's a different type of quality. So now I know that we've gone to a bunch of different events at the AquaTurf and heard a lot of stuff
Mhm.
about density and, building more on smaller, that's what the new thing is. So, I mean,
I'm
I
not
think-
against something like that being built.
I
I'm
understand
not,
that, but I'm just
not
trying to
there.
explain the different types
Right.
of
It just doesn't
developments.
belong in everybody's backyard.
Okay, well, like I said, Copper Beach is that kind of development.
Right,
So,
but they're homes, beautiful,
Yes.
nice homes, not
okay.
condos.
gotcha. All right, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dave Schrum, 369 Sir Walter Drive, pretty much almost immediately next door to the proposed development. But before I get started, I just have a housekeeping question. There was a petition submitted
Yeah.
by residents of this area. Need to know whether that has been A, received, and B, accepted, and C, will that mean it requires a 2/3 majority of this commission? That ought to be determined right now, not on the night that you vote, because such strange things happen on the night that you vote.
We have received it. The petition. We've received it.
Is it deemed to be valid?
And yes,
So therefore, it's going to require a 2/3 vote of this body to
We're
approve.
assuming that that's true.
yeah, we're assuming
so-
that already.
That's true.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that before we get too far down the road.
Yep.
Okay. Most of the land in question here tonight was part of the Platt Dairy Farm. When no longer viable, the very large portion south of Wallingford Road was sold to Heritage Hills Developers, Joe Potter, if you remember him, and it became an R80 Tamarack development. North of Wallingford Road, on what is now the Kurtz property, Heritage Hills had a normal subdivision plan prepared by Conklin and Soroka Engineering, you may remember them, in early 1987, showing 10 conventional 1-acre lots. Very simple, 10 1-acre lots. This map was used to test this property in May of 1987. 25 test holes showed some difficult soils. Septic systems would be possible, but development might be a bit more expensive. And I have copies of all those test pit results, each test pit that showed water level, modeling, all the things that you normally find when you dig a test pit. Very interesting. Obviously different soils, some sandstone ledge in there, tough place. Heritage Hills did not pursue this property, and instead it became controlled by Commissioner Matt Bowman. That only lasted a short time since, as he told us at the first public hearing, he traded it to Earl Kurtz for some of his land on Jarvis Street, which became the Devonwood development, which town historians will note had its own water runoff problems. History shows that even though only one large brick house was built with extensive landscaping, Mr. Kurtz was thinking about the eventual development of all his land. His purchase of a house on Charles Drive in 2003 and the placement of a 50-foot access easement on Charles Drive is one indication. Another was his ongoing interest in the writing of the new master plan for Cheshire's sewer system, which led up to the expansion of our plant. At this point, the water issues were starting to bubble up. Homes on Charles Drive had their backyards become lakes. Neighbors to the north noticed more water coming through the woods that had become the open space for the Copper Beach cluster development on Talmadge Road. Get back to that in a minute. In 2004, Mr. Kurtz, and I believe, Matt, you were involved in this too, were involved in the development of two houses immediately across the street from tonight's subject property. One house is right on the road. The other is way down in back where it was squeezed in between a hillside and large wetlands. The lady has talked about that in the past, the person that lives in that house. The flow from the Platt farmland, which is now the Kurtz front lawn, property had historically simply gone under Wallingford Road and out into an open field. That's the blue section on the map here tonight, the front lawn of Mr. Kurtz's house. The two new houses required redirecting of this water and some of the water from Wallingford Road catch basins down a new easement that ran between the new house and I believe it's Mr. Thatcher's house next door. Out of sight, out of mind. A question for this developer is, what are you going to do about the additional water? Now, we heard tonight that that blue section, oh, I'm going to reduce the flow of water going down through that pipe. Okay, let's remember that. That water's got to go somewhere. It's not going to disappear. I guess it's going to go back to the detention pond. It used to go under Wallingford Road. That's where it went, but now it's not going to go under Wallingford Road. Only some of it. In 2013, Mr. Kurtz commissioned Mylona McBroom to prepare a new subdivision map. Here it is right here, dated August 26, 2013. It was used by Chespercott to dig 35 test pit holes for 11 1-acre lots. So they went from 10 1-acre lots to 11 1-acre lots, perked it, normal conventional subdivision, R40. Neighbors wouldn't have a thing to say. The perk tests were done on between March 14th and March 20th, 2014. And like the previous perk tests from 1987, they showed many issues with the soil's ability to handle water, septic or otherwise. They confirmed what neighbors in that entire area know, that water doesn't go away as easily as developers, engineers say it does. It just doesn't. The soils there are different. They're difficult. He had 2 different rounds of perk tests that showed that. And if you want to look at all the test pits results, I'll provide them to you. They're up there in the Chesprocott files. Just as an historic side note, the $2,635 charge that Chesprocott made for those test pits was paid for by Apex Development on March 25th of 2014. I think we've heard of that group. But any development languished. Nothing happened for a while. Maybe it was because of the bad perks. Maybe they were waiting for something else to happen. Something else did happen. Phil died on February 20th, 2016. Who's Phil? Phil Suffredini, 63 years old, lived on Talmadge Road and owned the 2 hay fields that are the subject of this discussion. I don't think he would ever have sold those 2 fields, okay, knowing his family and going back through time. But when you die suddenly, stuff happens. Nothing is more valuable to a developer than access to sewers, and the Talmadge Road hayfields provided what Kurtz and Company had been waiting for, a path to the sewer pipe, the manhole on Talmadge Road at the low point. You drive over it every time you go down Talmadge Road. 5 months after Phil's death, his uncle, Frank Longo, who was the sole heir to Phil's estate, made a joint application with Mr. Kurtz to amend the rules. Very expensive document here, folks. Very expensive document. High-priced lawyer, a lot of engineering. What they made an application for was to change the town's master sewer plan. Now, we had just gotten done developing the town's master sewer plan, because you have to do that before you upgrade your wastewater treatment plant, which cost the town $31 million, by the way, which we're all still paying for in the bond.
How much, Dave?
Okay, so
How much did it cost?
$31.6 million.
Thank you.
The plan, Matt, I don't know if you remember, cost a little over $500,000 for them to put the plan together. Kurtz and Longo came in and said, you know what? The plan's all very nice. You did all this research. You tested the soils. Believe me, the plan is very interesting about soils, especially soils in this area. Okay? But you know what? Change the rules for us. Change the rules for us. So they did change the rule. They did change the rules. They changed the rules in January of 2017, and they allowed this land to get sewers. And that set off, and the implication, and it was mentioned just a minute ago, the implication was that if you give me sewers, it's going to be cheaper to sewer Charles Drive and Sir Walter Drive, which all the residents on Charles and Sir Walter Drive want sewers. There's a whole bunch of people in this room tonight that will tell you that back in 2016 and 2017, when the neighbors found out that Mr. Kurtz was saying that we all wanted sewers, there was a bit of a firestorm. I never saw so many people at a water pollution control hearing as I saw that night. People came out and said, that's baloney. Okay? We don't want sewers. Chesprocott said, there aren't a lot of failures out there. You may never have to sewer this area. You can if you want, but you may never have to sewer it. But the rationale, big part of the rationale that was used to give the Kurtz property sewers was that they could get to Charles and Sir Walter. Now, an outstanding issue, I don't want to get into this, it's a whole nother story, but to get some of those houses, if you're going to sewer them, okay, to get some of those houses, to get gravity feed into Talmadge Road, you got to dig awful deep. You better have a long arm on that bucket. And if you're got a long arm on that bucket, they haven't done any tests out there for core drilling. They have no idea what it's going to take to get across that wetlands. Okay, separate story for in the wetlands, but that's a separate story. So we went from 10 acres, 10 houses on 1 acre lots, to 11 houses on 1 acre lots. And in this, they said, I'll tell you what, sewers, we'll do 20 houses on half acre lots. See what sewers do? Sewers invite density. Okay? Developers dream. Why not? So they got their sewers. Section 21.9 of our regulation says, no structure shall be used, erected, or expanded, and no land shall be graded or hard serviced unless provisions have been made for proper disposal of drainage water. What we heard tonight from the applicant's engineers, I'm sorry, you can talk about modeling until the cows come home, but use your common sense, folks. I took physics at Cheshire High School. My teacher said matter cannot be created or destroyed. Water can't be made to disappear. It's not going to disappear. It's got to go somewhere. Get into that in just a minute. This development will sit on a plateau on the highest land in that point of Cheshire. Look at that front lawn, folks. It's like an aircraft carrier. It's at 315 feet at the highest point. Look at the old topo maps. Just as all roads lead to Rome in the classical world, all water leaves the Kurtz property in every direction. Water ends up in 3 different watersheds: the Mill River, Honeypot Brook that goes into the Quinnipiac, and Broad Brook goes across Wallingford Road, down and back, around the corner, into Broad Brook, and down into the Meriden water supply. Three different ways that it goes. When this was a plat farm field, that was perfectly manageable. Matter of fact, the cow manure that used to wash off the barn area there used to go into Wallingford Road, kept that field nice and green year round. It's a great spot. Anyway, the applicant's water management plan tries to account for the hard surfaces that accompany any development. We heard it, roofs, driveways, roads, but this development is unique. What's different about this, what you got to pay attention to, is it's going to have another source of water that will be impossible to deal with, and that's groundwater. We don't hear about groundwater, do we? At planning and zoning and in the wetlands, and those kinds of meetings. Nobody wants to talk about something, about sump pumps. I want to talk about sump pumps. As I just mentioned, there was a 1987 perk testing of those 10 proposed lots. In 2014, Apex Development paid for another round of perk tests for those 11 lots. Done 27 years apart, those perk tests all showed the same thing: high water table, poor soils, tough drainage. Now, rarely do developers, engineers talk about water from sump pumps. It is an oversight that this commission, the Water Pollution Control Authority, and in the wetlands ought to ask more questions about. It is absolutely certain there will be 34 new sump pumps in this development. How do I know? Because just before the last public hearing, coming up the stairs, Mr. Lovely told me that there would be a sump pump in every single one of these houses. 34 sump pumps. A typical sump pump can put out 3,000 gallons of water an hour. In wet weather, my sump pump runs several times a day for at least an hour. And there's people here tonight that will tell you that their sump pumps do the same thing. 3,000 gallons of water because of the soils in this area. And the Kurtz property is no different. On a 1 acre lot, you can find a way to deal with it. Some of you do it, right? You put the hose out, you put up with your neighbors, there's sump pumps, it runs out into the street, everything's fine. What are you going to do with 34 sump pumps on 1/4 acre lots? What are you going to do? Common sense. What are you going to do? You know what you're going to do? You're going to go to Heinz or some other local store. You're going to buy some PVC pipe and you're going to put it into your sewer line in your basement. Happens all over the town of Cheshire. Town has been fighting that for years. It is a $100 fine for you to do that. I'll bet you $100 right now that fine hasn't been imposed in the last God knows how many years. It is a constant fight. Now, the developer's suggestion will be not to worry, folks. We'll just still dig a little hole over here and we'll direct all the sump pump into that, like a dry well, right? We have those, some of us. I'll direct it into the dry well. But when your water table is so high, firstly, at ground level, a dry well is useless, absolutely useless. So that's not a solution to 34 sump pumps. So infiltration and inflow into the town sewer system. Now, you would think that the WPCA would think about that. And in fact, the WPCA did think about that. They thought about that when they put the master plan together and they said that area shouldn't be sewered. Hello? But they changed the rules. So now you got sewers. Now, you folks have to deal with the water. People will say that's water pollution control's problem. Now, water pollution control will say, yeah, but that's a zoning problem. They're the ones that are letting 34 houses go there. So where is it? It falls in the gray zone that developers have driven a truck through for years in this town. The little areas between inland wetlands, planning and zoning, water pollution control. Okay? You folks are the end game. You're the end game. You're the top of the period that have to put all this together and figure, you know what? Does this make sense or does it not make sense? Now, people may say, you know, what's the problem? A couple thousand gallons here, a couple thousand gallons there. Our wastewater treatment plant, $31 million, has a capacity of 4 million gallons. That's its rated capacity to be able to treat the stuff properly before it goes into the Quinnipiac River. Normal day, I think we're about 2.2 million gallons, depending on the weather. Okay? But in wet weather, that plant has taken over 7 million gallons a day. And you know what happens to it? It gets dumped into the Quinnipiac River because there's nothing else you can do about it. So every time you say I, infiltration and inflow, which is what we're talking about here, you're adding to the problem. Now, people say, 1,000 gallons here, 1,000 gallons here. What difference does it make? You folks are supposed to make decisions about what's good for the town overall. Waterbury paper, 12 days ago. Connecticut shoreline beaches closed. Bacteria. Why? Stuff coming down from sewer plants, including the ones on the Quinnipiac River. Hello, Cheshire. Hello. But Whispering Oaks, it's going to be a great development. It's going to be a great development. You got to think about that. All right. Now, a couple of things tonight. A couple of unicorns. You know, unicorns, everybody believes in unicorns. They're going to dig 34 foundations and make the dirt go away. They're not taking any dirt off the site. Does that make any sense? And if it does make sense, they're going to have to put it someplace else on the site. Where are they going to put it? You're going to have to raise the, huh? Well, you got a berm along Wallingford Road. Well, that's one foundation. And I guess you raise it on the site, I hope, over along Charles Drive, so those people don't get the water. And I guess you put it around and back on the north side, so the people over on Dawson Road, to use it, I guess we call it, Dawson Lane, don't get water coming down into that little pond on Talmadge. That's an awful lot of dirt. And if they're going to raise that, where's the water going to go? It's not going to go onto surrounding neighbors' property. Leave that to the engineers. It just doesn't make any sense to say that you're going to have no more water coming off the site. And I know they'll cite this detention pond, okay? That detention pond is going to fill up. The water is going to go up.
I don't want to interrupt you, but your testimony is that you don't believe the engineers. You feel that the engineers are wrong.
I don't know. No, you know what?
That you're
The
you're
water
saying
can
that
go off.
the water that the engineer here and the engineer that we hired as a town are both wrong, and that
No, they're not.
you're
No, Sean,
because you
no.
know the area, that you know that they're going to have a problem that they can't see.
If all the water that goes onto that site and they haven't touched, did they mention 34 sump pumps at 3,000 gallons an hour? They didn't, did they?
Well,
They talk about
Th-
rainfall. and
This
100
is,
year
like I
storms.
said, I mean, you've been there long enough. You live in the neighborhood. He lives in the neighborhood, right? You've been in that area your whole life.
Since I was 5 years old.
Okay. So now you know the topography there. I want you to tell me all the ponds that dried up over there.
Well, the ponds had dried up.
There hasn't been any change of waterways
Oh,
since
heavens,
Copper Beach,
no,
since all
heavens.
the other developments up there?
Well,
True or
let's-
false?
Let's talk about the Copper Beach.
But I'm just saying is I'm asking you a question. You live in that area. You understand there. Woody lived in that area. Since you've been there and all the development that's happened in that area, Not even talking about this development at all. I'm saying the other developments that have come in, even, you saw Sir Walter, you saw all those developments come in, right? I mean, I'm not
Yes,
dating you,
right.
but you're old enough to know
Sir
what all,
Walter-
every time a development came in, the course of the only guy, he's been in the house, that he's got the old house that, the farmers built. So he's saying he never has a water problem. But I'm saying as far as those houses that went into the development and the waterways that changed over
Yeah.
the course,
Yeah.
right? And everybody's got a sump pump in Cheshire. I mean, my God, it's rained every single day. Noah called. He wants to bring the ark back. But I'm just saying is that the sump pump, everybody has a sump pump. It's not going to change for Cheshire, a sump pump. And there's other towns where people have sump pumps too.
That's
So I
true.
really don't
That's true.
think that that's a quality of life issue with a sump pump. I mean, that's just
No, but
part of
Troy,
owning a
no,
house,
well,
I
can tell you,
it's
your
part of owning
quality
a
life
house,
is pretty crappy with a sump pump when it breaks and it doesn't work.
No,
That's another
and
story.
I've been there. I've had it break. I've had a flood in my house. And,
All I'm saying-
I get it. But I'm just
John,
saying is
all
that
I'm
like,
saying is that if in today's world, okay,
Yes.
Shawalter Drive and Charles Drive, most of those houses were built by Ravenswood in 1965, 66, 67. It didn't have the regulations that you have now. It didn't have the perk testing for septic systems that you have now. And the people that live there have put up with dealing with high water tables. So
okay,
the question is,
understand. Okay,
now that we
I
know
understand that. And I agree with that. But I'm trying to say is that like a development besides them is not going to change their sump pump.
It absolutely will change. You know why? First of all, you don't put 34 sump pumps in a congested little area. You're just asking for trouble. You're either asking for more surface water. 34 sump pumps in 10 acres?
Mr.
Come
Bowman
on.
wants to answer.
Come on.
David's a little low on the flow. I think a sump pump will put out about 3,600 gallons an hour, but that's all right. He's an expert on everything.
It's 28, it's 28
I sat
gallons
I sat at the time on the water pollution control. And he just stated here right now, we have a 4 million gallon plant. And as a taxpayer here, I'm going to tell you this. If you have a factory that can produce 4,000 of something or 4 million of something, and you're producing 2.2 million of something, you're certainly not running efficiently. There was not, of the $31 million that was put into that plant, and I was part of that design, and I was part of that commission. That plant came in on time and on budget. And not 1 gallon of capacity was added to that plant. But we have one of the most modern sewer plants in the state of Connecticut, bar none. But he wants, and he fought it every step of the way in 15, 16, 17, 18, every time he wanted to stop development, that's how he was going to do it. And they had a state law that, or a state regulation that sewers couldn't be put only in specific areas. And Mr. Kurtz proved him wrong. As a matter of fact, where Mr. Linder sits was the town attorney during that public hearing, and the town attorney apologized to Mr. Kurtz's attorney for being wrong about the public regulation for extending the sewer. And on the dais also was a member of AECOM, who was our representative and our designer of that plant, who got out into the public and said, the state law says that you cannot, under the threat of losing your reimbursement, extend that sewer into any area that is considered a conservation point. That was wrong. That was all wrong. Mr. Kurtz proved that. He got the sewer approval. We're talking about sump pumps going into a sewer system that aren't allowed. And the design by the engineer has to be that water has to go into a groundwater detention area for each individual home, into either some sort of rain garden or some sort of underground discharge. So we're sitting here listening to this pontification that has no basis of merit whatsoever.
You are exactly wrong, Mr. Bowman.
But Mr.
and you're-
Tedesco's gonna
you're-
ask one more
you're a
question. Hold on.
Master at, there was a state plan of conservation and development that the state said to the towns, if you let development go out into these areas, if you put sewers into these areas, we are not going to give you state funding for future sewers. They changed it because the real estate lobby went to Hartford to the state legislature
But
and
it's
got the
nothing to
law
do with-
changed.
Mr.
And this
Desco has a
thing-
question
and
for you.
So don't, Matt, don't give me that Mr. Kurtz
I've already
proved
given
wrong.
it to you, Dave, and I gave you the truth.
It's,
Mr.
well,
Tedesco
you
has a,
did not.
Mr. Desco has a question.
Truth is not something you're
Let,
good with.
let Mr. Desco ask the question.
All right, I'm just gonna, yeah, go
Let
ahead.
him ask.
Well, we're getting a little off the topics of the hearing. Mr. Strum has gone on at some length and given very detailed testimony on his belief, I believe, that the project will result in water damage to neighbors for the various reasons you've given tonight. It seems that the engineers that we've had disagree with that. I think we've all heard both sides of the
Yes.
story now. The engineers can respond to you if they want before we leave tonight or next time. But I think we've heard your testimony, Mr. Strum, in detail. You've been very articulate and very detailed. We've heard what you have to say. You haven't brought an engineer to say what you're going to say, but let's hear what the engineers say. And then we've heard the testimony is, and we can move on to something else.
Just a minute, Mr. Disco, before the engineer gets up, the water that comes off that site, there's got to be more water coming off that site. It goes into the detention pond and then it overflows the detention pond. It goes down through the wetlands and we heard him say it a million times. It goes under Talmadge Road. What are they doing about improving that water flow? Because if you believe that they're going to make the water disappear, because that's what they said, we're cutting out water coming off the site, that's illogical. And one other thing about detention ponds, next time you drive down Talmadge Road, look at the well-maintained detention pond for the Copper Beach development. Look at that detention pond. It's right next to the road. And you know what? There's trees this big growing up through the detention pond.
Matt
That
has
tells
the
you a
answer
little
to
bit
that.
about how
There's
detention ponds are
three
maintained.
watersheds there.
Because they're not. They're
The
not.
watershed that David lives in goes to Broadbrook.
Yep.
The watershed that this subdivision is, for all intents and purposes, goes to Mill River, with a small portion of it going to Quinnipiac. There's three watersheds within
They're all connected.
within this subdivision. And you know what? It all flows in different directions. He's trying to say that it's all concentrating either on their subdivision, which it's not, or into another area, which it's not.
I know, but I would say, guys, look, it's a public hearing. You should give the public a chance to talk. This is wrong what we're doing up here, really wrong. I sat here for almost 30 years. This is wrong. We opened up to the public. Let the public speak, please.
Okay. Mr. Geis.
Bob Geiser. 860 Wallingford Road, and I do have a sump pump. I don't have a sump pump, I mean. All right, listen, I'm here because of the dump on Wallingford Road and the trucks and whoever did the traffic thing, speeders, they're wrong. But I come here for these people. I think you remember 2007, Dimick said, yeah, they went to build up on the side of me. And I had to pay $20,000 to get a lawyer and an engineer, and it was Garcia from Bethany, to tell you people that I'll be flooded. But you were going to put this right through. And you remember that. You were at my house
What,
on my land.
there was a development, 2 lots in the back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, if I don't understand, you guys are for the taxpayer, not for the builder. No offense to the engineer, but they had an engineer the same way. They wouldn't do this, it wouldn't do that. But they would have flooded my barn out if I let them build. And it cost me a lot of money for that.
Okay.
Now, getting back to the tree farm.
Yeah, but that's
He
got nothing
was
to-
grandfathered in.
That's got-
How could you be grandfathered in?
That's got
No,
no-
I'm going to talk. How could you be grandfathered in growing trees?
you-
Old man Coleman used to grow corn there, not trees. Has any of you guys been down Wallingford Road to see that dump?
we can't That's got nothing to do with this
Well,
application.
it does. It's traffic,
it-
trucks.
I
Somebody's
understand
going to
that.
pay for some damage to my house with these trucks going
Yeah.
down there. As soon as I get my lawyer.
But like I said, it's got nothing, that would be, you'd have to call the enforcement officer and then go.
And who is
way.
that?
You'd have to call the town planner or and go from there. You'd have to
Who's,
put-
I
you'd have to-
thought it was you.
No, I'm not.
Who's
the-
Mike
it's
Stroh?
a cousin, his cousin. So, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they don't stop coming down. Sundays, 5:30 in the morning till 7 at night.
But like I
That's
said,
traffic. No, but it's traffic. You had somebody say there's no traffic on the road. I
No,
can't
they
go to
didn't
the
say-
mailbox.
They didn't say there was no traffic. They said there was 2,000. And that's what they said.
And every one
what
of
the
them
police
is
department-
60 miles an hour plus. And I'm sure there's more people here that knows that.
Well, like I said, anything to do with the tree
Well,
farm, whatever, you need to address that with the town planner and then make a complaint, a formal complaint, and then go from there. That's what you have to do.
This is
But
3
that's got
years.
nothing to do with this
I've been doing
application.
it.
Nothing.
Well, to
Zero.
me, it does.
It,
Who
it
do I see
doesn't
then?
because it's got nothing to do with the application. Zero. That's a different thing you have to address. Okay, I'm sorry.
Hi again, Laura Clark, 635 Wallingford Road. So I grew up on Long Island. It's potato fields, but now it's just developments. Have you ever driven down I-95? I mean, might as well be LIE. It's crazy. Anyway, my house on this little map, you can't see. So like the blue line doesn't, my house would be like here. So I don't know if someone can explain to me how that's going to fix my drainage. And the other thing was, if you guys want to come over and like just walk down my driveway any day, I don't even have to be home. Come on down. You will see a steady stream of water. I thought it was a broken sprinkler head of 630, the one next to me. I have an easement. You all know that now. And it's like a steady stream of water, day, night, middle of the day, constant. I don't know if she has a busted sprinkler head because that's what it looks like to me. But she says she doesn't. So the water is a major issue. My house isn't even on this map thing. So I don't see, I can't like physically see what we're talking about. All I know, big pipe, river. I have another river that goes down. My house is like, my property is like 75% wetlands. It probably shouldn't have been approved in the first place, but I didn't do it. It's fine. So that's all I want to say. Thank you for thinking of me though, when you did bring up my question before.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Michael Galecki, Galecki of 850 Wallingford Road. So I moved here about 14 years ago with my girlfriend. We bought a 30-acre farm. We had kids. We've been raising a great family here. It's been an awesome place to live. Every single person that I've brought to show off our farm or bring to visit, I turn on my left blinker to the Kurtz brick house and pretend like I'm going to pull in there and watch their jaw hit the steering wheel when they see the place there.
Yeah.
So that's about the same reaction that my kids had when they heard that they're 9 and 11-year-old girls, and when they heard that that house is getting torn down and there's going to be 40 units going in there. I know it's 34 now, but they don't care about that either. That's just the most pure reaction that you're going to get of the next generation of kids that are hoping to grow up in Cheshire and enjoy the place. We're not planning to subdivide our farm or make any changes. You know, what farms are even left on Wallingford Road? You drive down, you could see Drazen, Thatcher's Honey and Eggs, and my farm, and then all of a sudden you're in Wallingford 3 miles later. You know, it's just turned into development after development. So a place that my kids would say, oh, our driveway's the third left after the condos. That just does not fit in with the harmony, you know, of the neighborhood that we have. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. The Cheshire, for me, we're getting a little down in the weeds with runoff coefficients and all the technical things for the water. It's very simple. The Cheshire Plan of Conservation is to preserve our semi-rural landscape. There's literally no gray area. This is what you guys do. you guys have taken an oath to preserve our semi-rural landscape. It's defined as a town suburb near farm country. There's hardly any farms left. The suburbs are even starting to go away. Like you said, suburbs are evolving into these more higher density, I call them higher impact zones as well. There's no way you can put 34 homes in a small area like that and not have an impact. You're trying to bail out water from 34 basements. There's just, again, that doesn't make any sense. That was a great point that was brought up tonight. To me also, there were some numbers that were thrown around at the meeting last time. I think it was around 90,000 square feet of these 34 homes of actual top-down area. If you look at, say, like a flyover of it. If you just put in the 16 homes, a rough calculation is it's only about half of that area. So it's like, yeah, they're high density, but there's still a lot more buildings. It's a much higher impact no matter how you look at it. So for me, I just couldn't see why you guys would want to approve the zoning change and just make such a drastic change to what my kids are going to grow up in this town. And I take I don't agree with the statement that was made that there are less kids nowadays. You guys are getting older. There's no doubt about it. There's an older generation that we love, that we want to take care of and have a place for them to live. Go to Highland School. There's 600 kids in the school. This is not a small town. We're not dwindling. Where my parents live in Vermont, there's no kids. Everyone moves out. My kids are staying. We're hoping to stay in this place, and we want to keep it beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Hall, 140 Talmadge Road. And I'm here to talk about water and sump pumps again. The points have been made that the engineers feel like there's not going to be additional groundwater coming off. I am not an engineer. I cannot believe that. It's got to go somewhere. Today, there's already too much water going off. I look around this room and I see folks that all have sump pumps, and you've acknowledged a lot of people have sump pumps. And as I said at the last meeting, I went to look at my house and I told a friend who was an engineer, I was looking at this particular house. He said, first thing you do when you walk through that door is go to the basement and make sure there's a sump pump. And I found two at each end of the house. And I need them. And I look over here at Mr. Martin, who testified last time. We can see each other from our backyards, but it's about a 15-minute walk for me to get to his driveway because we can't cross the backs of our properties to each other at any time of the year. And so today, with the situation we have too much water. A lot of people have been talking about the retention pond at the bottom of Talmadge Road that crosses the road to the alpaca farm. Not only does that pond get overwhelmed and that culvert get overwhelmed, but there's enough water that it's actually coming out of the hill, the side of the road. It leaches over the curb, runs along Talmadge Road, and goes into the sink basin. That's on the north side. This is after a recent storm. And then if you look farther down in this picture here, you'll see that lovely pavered driveway the gentleman has. I can give you guys my little photos. That lovely pavered driveway that the gentleman has with the retaining wall, retaining pond. Water's coming out of the ground on that side too, and then that runs on Talmadge Road and down across the apron of Dawson Lane and into that sink basin. There's too much water today. We can't afford another ounce of this. And there's been a lot of testimony tonight about the degree to which these assessments were done before it went to IWWC and before it came here. And it seems to me that it wasn't a thorough assessment and that there is more that needs to be done for folks to apparently have the evidence that this is not a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Just submit it to Marilyn, please.
Hi, my name is Dave Sheehan, 345 Charles Drive. I just want to say that I grew up here in Cheshire, and it's changed a lot in my time. And some of the changes have been for the better and some not for the better. I don't feel this is for the better at all. The traffic study, pretty bogus, really. I think it was really, whatever the number was going to be, they were going to say, they're just going to add a couple more cars to it, and then the traffic's not going to be a problem. But in the real world, where we all live, traffic is already a problem down there. So we know this is going to add to it. There's many houses going to add to it. And I think the water has been talked about ad nauseum. I have a sump pump ourselves with us, and every spring we're flooded out. And the concern is for those of us that live down there, not in theory, that this is going to cause a lot of water problems. And I think we're all pretty convinced that it will. But the bigger issue for me is the Harmony. And I think it doesn't fit in with the neighborhood. I grew up on Ives Row. I moved over to Charles Drive because of the big area, because of the big land. And now, we're going to put this huge industrial complex behind us. And nobody in the area that lives there, not you all, but of those of us down that live there, none of us really want this. And is it going to be better for the betterment of Cheshire? Obviously, no. I think we all know that. So why are we doing this? I don't even know why we're even still talking about this. We just keep having these meetings and it keeps coming up and nobody really wants this. So it doesn't fit in with the Harmony. I think even the lawyer couldn't explain that. He got stumbled on that. So for myself, and I think I speak for many of the folks here, we don't want this and we'd like to see it not approved.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mike Mangello, 384 Sir Walter Drive. I had a whole list of things that I was going to say, but everybody else has already
Hold on a
said
second.
it.
Mike, could you just give your last name, please?
Mangello, Mongillo,
And your address, please.
384 Sir Walter Drive.
Thank you.
Like I said, I had a whole list of things I was going to read, but I've been preempted, okay?
Yep, good.
So I just want to talk about one thing. I moved into this home in 1971. When I moved there, I was told, well, let me go back. I was there one day and my well went out, and it was the only time in my job when I had to travel. So my wife was left with my 3 children, all in diapers and with no water. She went to the town planner, wherever they keep where my well was supposed to be. Well, they found out that it had been signed off 3 times, that my well was in the front of the house and my septic system was in the back of the house. You know what? The building inspector must have had an awfully bad day when he signed off 3 times. Because just the opposite is true. My septic system's in the front of the house, which is 20 feet higher than the back of the house where my well is. That's just an aside. But when I first moved there, my land was beautiful and dry. I own a little bit more than an acre, a little less than 2 acres. 3 weeks ago, in my new John Deere tractor, I got stuck. I had to use my Explorer with a tow rope to tow my John Deere out of the ditch where all the water is accumulated. I have 2 areas in my land where I cannot mow my grass because my mower will sink, and it's getting worse every year. I cannot believe, I just can't believe that there will be no impact from the water coming off this that's going to affect me and my neighbors.
So since 1971, what has changed around you in your property that has caused more water?
I have just the higher water table. Maybe the new developments. I don't know. All I know is my next door neighbor had to put in a valve on his washing machine because when it rained, the septic system would come down the area, the pipe where the water went out, and it didn't flood his washing machine or his basement.
He put a backwater valve on.
That's it. That's a good one.
Yeah, he's put a backwater valve on. The person you're looking for is, have you ever heard of Colonel Barnum?
Yeah, I think he would say the sucker was born every minute.
Well,
And that's what I feel like I'm being
Colonel Barnum was a Cheshire resident. His father was the building inspector, probably the man that signed off on that. And he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor in Vietnam.
Well, that's pretty good, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But how you tell me how somebody could sign off 3 times that my well is supposed to be in the front of my house when my septic system's there? Just give me that answer. Thank you. And I don't think I want to argue. And I don't want to argue with you. Do what that gentleman said. Let us talk.
No, I'm
Thank
just going to give you the answer. The answer is that's why the State Health Department, Chespercott, was formed, because these things happened more than you think.
All I
And
know is
Chestercott-
it happened to me, and that's the only one I'm concerned about. And I'm also concerned about the amount of water that's on my land. And if this goes through, I believe that more water will be on my land and will also affect my neighbors. And also talk about harmony. No, thank you.
Mr. Mangilla, can I just ask you one question? Is your lot border this development?
No.
No, you're on the
No.
other side?
We're down from it, but we're below. So I think water flows down the hill, doesn't it?
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, is there anything else from public wishes to speak? No. Okay, anything else? Commissioner, Mr. Bricado.
Yeah, I just had a request for the applicant. Is there any way you can show renderings of what the view is going to look like of the complex or the development from Wallingford Road, looking at it with the berms and the trees and the buildings?
Again, Andrew Quirk, professional engineer, for the record. I mean, that's something we can do. We have detailed it pretty well on sheet S1, although it's not a rendering, but it does show the list of the plantings. And
I
then we
just
have
wanted to see like a rendering of what it would look like if you were driving by in a car with the berms, the trees, and what you're going to see in the buildings behind. What they talked about being the vinyl walls.
It's something we can look into.
And also, are there any signage or lightage out on the road for this development?
There is a colonial lanterns that are shown on the plan and profile sheets, and there's a detail that shows those with the full cutoff.
Is there any signage out on Wallingford Road?
There's just at the entrance, there's just a name sign at the berm location.
Is there any images of that or how big it is? or
That
any-
we don't have an image of, but
If you can get
we
that
could- we could look
to
at
to
that.
us, please. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Deska. please.
Just for the record, because I've spoken a couple times, I don't live in the area, but I've driven around this area a couple times for purposes of viewing the area because of this application. I may drive there again. Thank you.
I'll just, a couple quick replies. I know it's getting
Sure.
late, but just first, I wouldn't discredit the people that live there, that have experienced the soils, the groundwater, all of that. All that information is very helpful for me in terms of the design. And, I always take that into account with designing the projects. I will say that the design you have before you accounts for those factors that have been raised. We have presented the soils data that shows that they are B and C type soils. They're not type A soils. We have soils testing that's performed shown on G4, and it does indicate the modeling. So those things were taken into consideration with the design. You also have excellent review town engineer that also brought up that information. You'll see it in the comment responses where many of those same issues were raised, and we responded and was satisfied. So the existing conditions that are there, the groundwater, the runoff, all of that, those are conditions that exist because of the types of soils and types of runoff, and the fact that this month we've got the third highest rainfall ever recorded. So I don't deny any of those conditions, but I do think that the proposal before you, the information you have, the soils data reflects those same findings. So I don't see them as contradictory. I see them as reinforcing what is in the information that was provided.
Mr. Shrum stated about the sump pumps in this project. Is there in your engineer plan where that water is going to go?
Yes, it's on the grading plan. It's shown. We are showing 29 of the 34 units have sump pumps. We have 5 walkout units where they can drain by gravity, not by sump pump.
And where's that water pumped back into to go towards the stormwater
Yeah, it's
basin?
indicated to the surface and draining towards the stormwater basin.
Okay.
And then there's also the roof water collection system, which we've kept separate to recharge the groundwater separately from the sump pump system, so that we're not commingling we don't want to just be recycling the same water, if you will, that there's separate systems. There was also a comment about, the watershed areas and the culvert. And again, the purpose of this map was to show the site, watershed areas and the areas for the change in development. So that's the reason it's not extended beyond, the areas that are impacted directly by the development. So that culvert is that point that receives the water from the site in the pre-existing condition and in the post. That's the analysis point that shows that we've got a reduction in peak discharge rates. I want to make sure it's clear that we're dealing with peak discharge rates. We're not claiming that there's going to be zero runoff from the site. There's numbers there in your report that you have that indicate the runoff rates and that we are meeting the town regulations for not exceeding the pre-development runoff rates. But there will be runoff, there will be these existing conditions that are there, but your regulations require that we don't exacerbate or make those situations worse. And
But it's a
that culvert-
decrease in runoff from what's there now.
Correct, correct. And that culvert then leads downstream to the areas that were discussed. We just, for the analysis, we looked at that inlet at the point of where we have the impact. Other than that, again, I would really look at the comment and responses that were provided with 2 rounds to the engineer. I think a lot of those issues of groundwater and soils and runoff were clearly brought up by staff and addressed by us.
Okay, thank you. I know Mrs. Sheehan, you have a question?
Yes, I wasn't going to come up here, but until the question was asked, would you show a view from Wallingford Road? I would like to request that you show a view from our backyards, which is where they're going. Basically, if you're on Charles Drive or Talmadge, they're in our backyards. So, and I would like to invite each and every one of you to drive through our neighborhood and see how beautiful it is, and then to picture the change that will occur in our neighborhood. So I would like to see a view of how it will look from our backyards. So we have a pool in our backyard, and I'm going,
It's yes, Sheehan, Sharon Sheehan, 345 Charles Drive. I drove through the neighborhood. I know that on that
okay.
side looking towards the applicant, it's wooded on the.
It is wooded, it's
It is wooded.
beautiful.
And but I'm saying
And
is
it's
that
private.
it's wooded on the edge of where the stone walls and stuff.
Mhm.
And I know from looking at the map that it looks like none of that really heavy wooded, which is right on the line, is going to be disturbed.
It's going to disturb entire road of Charles Drive. They are all going to, no one has trees. There are properties there that do not even have trees that abut the Kurtz's property. which
Like
it
I
will-
said, I'm looking at the first,
Yeah, but if you look at all the homes, especially from Wallingford Road, none of them have many of them don't have trees. They're going to be looking over at those condos. So what is their view going to be? I ask you.
It's you go.
What'd you say? I couldn't
She,
hear.
what's the view? But what the berm in the front is going to be wooded, right? And I know that if you go down to comparing it to what's the place where Marty lives on Cheshire Street, if you drive that's kind of like that kind of this kind of
Mhm.
development a little bit, and it's wooded, so you can't see it from the road if you're driving down. Do you know where that
I'm
is or not?
not-
If you come to the
I'm
end
not-
of
I'm not
if you
sure
come
you're
to the end
following
of,
my
of
question.
Blacks Road and you go on Cheshire Street, there's this,
Mhm.
kind of a 55 and over development, but it's wooded from the front. If you're coming down Wallingford Road, there's 2 berms in the front of this development, so you won't be able to see
No, but how about if you're living on Charles Drive?
on Charles Drive. That's what I was just saying. I drove down Charles Drive,
Okay.
and it's
you're-
heavily wooded on
You're
that.
saying none of Charles Drive is going to be impacted by that into their backyard? Is
Well,
that
I'm
what
just
you're
saying is that I don't really see that there's a lot of full-grown trees in
There's not a
between there
lot
that
of
are right.
full-grown trees to block it. And if you're saying 4-foot trees, you can see right over them. The point is, it's going to aesthetically change our neighborhood. Okay, and I don't think you guys want that in the back of your neighborhood. I'm sorry, we're not against building, but follow the rules and have nicely maintained homes. Okay, we do not want these here. We are going to continue fighting, and we hope that you guys are going to listen to us and make the right decision. We're the taxpayers, we're the neighborhood that you're impacting. We can't say it in any other way.
All right, thank you.
Charles Martin, 20 Copper Beach Drive, Cheshire. I wasn't going to come up either because there was a lot of technical information provided. And I'm no expert on the sewers or the water or the traffic. But if there's anybody who believes those reports, particularly on traffic, they should stand up because nobody believes that. The other side of it is when the applicants hire these experts, do you think they're going to hire someone who doesn't give them the information they want? If Lovely Construction or Attorney Fazzone hired an engineer that said Talmadge Road, Wallingford Road is going to look like Niagara Falls, they'd go hire a different consultant. So it's totally biased when you get these opinions from the applicants who provide the consultants with what they need. So
We have
wait a minute,
consultants from
wait,
the town.
if I hired a consultant and I hired a second consultant or a third consultant or a fourth consultant, I'd get 4 different opinions. And you heard the people here talk about the water. We've talked about the sewers. We've talked about the traffic. I'm not going to reiterate those. I'm also not going to talk about the smoke screen that Lovely Construction has put up relative to 40 homes to 34 homes, but the homes are now going to be bigger. What I do want to say in summary is that I don't believe there's anybody here who thinks this is a good idea. So I can't imagine how any of the board thinks this is a good idea. There's no one in this room other than Lovely Construction who thinks this is a good idea. And if you approve this, then you failed as the commission. The only person, I will tell you this, looks like Mr. Bowman has already put in his vote based on the conversations that he had with the group here tonight. But I would urge the rest of you to look at this very objectively, and there's no solid good reason why this should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fazzone, do you want to finish off with your presentation?
The 43.4.4, for which I set out how we felt about each of those items. And it's interesting that the way it's worded is that it says that the commission shall consider whether or not something is done. Even though the paragraph is entitled findings, it doesn't require a finding. For example, that as long as you consider those topics and it factors into and it balances off to the things that are there, you have a right to approve this without each and every one of them being the case. I don't know. I'm sensing that the commission may want to keep this hearing open.
I
I'm
mean,
not-
I don't really see how we're going to get any more information that you've already provided. I mean, I think the engineer gave us all the information. I think the traffic study gave us all the information. I really, I don't foresee any, if you have any something.
No,
other than
we don't really have. The only question that came up, Mr. Mercado was asking if we had an elevation or.
Yeah, I mean, if we
a
could get something where you could see
a
from the road,
rendering
a
of what it would
rendering.
look like from.
Yeah, I mean, if
Wallingford
you're
Road.
willing to keep that open for that, I'm willing to
Oh,
keep it open.
I would be thrilled if that was the reason, only
Yeah, I mean,
reason we're
but
going to
like
keep
I
it
said,
open.
I really think, I mean, tonight we covered a lot, and I really, yeah, I mean, and I mean, I don't know if I could carry anything else in here, but I mean, if you're willing to do a rendering and get that done, then I guess we
I'm
can
not
keep it
looking,
open.
I'm not looking to hold this open for that rendering. That
Well,
was,
I
if it was
mean,
held open,
if-
I'd like to see that. Yeah, if it was held open, I'd like that. If it's not to hold it.
Okay. I mean, consensus is we don't need to keep it open. Okay. All right, so, huh? Well, we could close it tonight. We could close the meeting tonight. I mean, but if you want the rendering, then we'd have to leave it open. Okay. So I think that is,
Have more evidence to present. You can decide.
yeah, well then if you have, yeah, we could keep it open if you are willing to do the rendering. But like I said, I really don't want to,
No, I,
you know,
not for any other purpose.
But I don't know if we can keep the hearing open just for that one piece of evidence. I mean, if we're going to keep it open, we keep it open. There was other information presented
yeah,
tonight.
I know.
Or we could close, as far as I'm concerned, we could close it, but if you keep it open, I think you keep it open for all purposes.
Yeah. I really, like I said, you know, I mean, I think that's, I don't know if we can vote on it. We can vote on keeping the meeting open. Yes, bring a motion.
Even if they were to give us renderings and give us renderings with elevations, correct me if I'm wrong, but there can always be field changes made,
Yeah.
plus or minus. So if you're looking for something that a house is set at 317 and then the house is set at 316, that is a normal field change.
I did not request that the whole dang thing open. I
Okay.
was assuming it was going to be held open, and if they came back, I would like that. So I'll actually rescind the question of asking for that.
I think for the record, the rendering would show, and I think Mr. Strollo brought it up, that, you know, the front of this is going to be landscaped so that ultimately
You can't see it.
it's going to be pretty much hidden from view from Wallingford Road.
Yeah, at this point, I think we have all the information. I think we've heard testimony on both sides. We've heard from the public. The public spoke. I really think that, you know, anything else from here on in would just be, you know,
That's fine.
stressful.
Yeah,
So,
I
you
think
know,
that's fine.
and I'm going to ask the public for some last comments before I close the hearing. So last comments, come on up, and last call. Come on up. Just give your name and address for the record, please.
Andrea Renzoni Becerra, 315 Sir Walter Drive. Good evening, Commissioner and Board, fellow Cheshire citizens, honored guests. In the words of my mother in heaven, please examine your consciences. Please, this is not the right decision for this community. It's not. And I think that each and everyone in your heart of hearts knows it. So my mother speaking to me from heaven, telling me, tell them, examine their conscience. Okay, so thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else that last statement?
I'll be very quick.
Sure.
Robert Wachowski, name and address previously given. 43.4.4 is entitled findings, and it does state what Attorney Fazone says. However, subsection H closes with, in making this finding, the recommendation of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Commission regarding the development will be taken into account. It clearly indicates that H, you have to make a finding. That leads me to believe that all the rest of those are not, you know, it is ambiguously written by stating that one in H, you have to make a finding. You have to make findings with the rest of them as well. That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's no other questions from commission members. There's no questions from the public. I'm going to close this meeting. Thank you very much. For public hearing. Okay, now motion to adjourn. Okay. Motion to adjourn. Second. Okay. Second, Brigaderos. Okay. Yeah, somebody else do it. Woody made the motion. I'll give him right home.